Homily 2, St. John Chrysostom. Homilies on the Gospel of St. Matthew, translated by the Reverend Sir George Prevost, M.A. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 2, Matthew 1:1. The Book of the Generation of Jesus Christ, the Son of David, the Son of Abraham. Do ye indeed remember the charge which we lately made you, entreating you to hearken unto all the things that are said with all silence and mystical quietness? For we are today to set foot within the holy vestibule, wherefore I have also put you in mind of the charge. Since if the Jews, when they were to approach a mountain that burned, and fire, and blackness, and darkness, and tempest, or rather when they were not so much as to approach, but both to see and to hear these things from afar, were commanded for 3 days before to abstain from their wives, and to wash their garments, and were in trembling and fear, both themselves and Moses with them. Much more we, when we are to hearken to such words, and are not to stand far from a smoking mountain, but to enter into heaven itself, ought to show forth a greater self-denial, not washing our garments, but wiping clean the robe of our soul, and ridding ourselves of all mixture with worldly things. For it is not blackness that ye shall see, nor smoke, nor tempest, but the King himself sitting on the throne of that unspeakable glory, and angels and archangels standing by him, and the tribes of the saints, with those interminable myriads. For such is the city of God, having the church of the firstborn, the spirits of the just, the general assembly of the angels, the blood of sprinkling, whereby all are knit into one, and heaven hath received the things of earth, and earth the things of heaven. And that peace hath come, which was of old longed for, both by angels and by saints. Herein standeth the trophy of the cross, glorious and conspicuous, the spoils won by Christ, the first fruits of our nature, the booty of our King. All these, I say, we shall out of the Gospels know perfectly. If thou follow in becoming quietness, we shall be able to lead thee about everywhere, and to show where death is set forth crucified, and where sin is hanged up, and where are the many and wondrous offerings from this war, from this battle. Thou shalt see likewise the tyrant here bound, and the multitude of the captives following, and the citadel from which that unholy demon overran all things in time past. Thou wilt see the hiding places and the dens of the robber, broken up now, and laid open, for even there also was our King present. But be not thou weary, beloved, if any one were describing a visible war, and trophies and victories, wouldest thou feel no satiety at all? Nay, thou wouldest not prefer either drink or meat to this history. But if that kind of narrative be welcome, much more this. For consider what a thing it is to hear how on the one side God from heaven, arising out of the royal thrones, leaped down unto the earth, and even unto hell itself, and stood in the battle array, and how the devil on the other hand set himself in array against him, or rather not against God unveiled, but God hidden in man's nature. And what is marvellous, thou wilt see death destroyed by death, and curse extinguished by curse, and the dominion of the devil put down by those very things whereby he did prevail. Let us therefore rouse ourselves thoroughly, and let us not sleep, for lo, I see the gates opening to us. But let us enter in with all seemly order, and with trembling, setting foot straightway within the vestibule itself. But what is this vestibule? The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham. What sayest thou? Didst thou not promise to discourse of the only begotten Son of God? And dost thou make mention of David, a man born after 1,000 generations, and say that he is both father and ancestor? Stay, seek not to learn all at once, but gently and by little and little. Why, it is in the vestibule that thou art standing, by the very porch. Why then dost thou hasten towards the inner shrine? As yet thou hast not well marked all without, for neither for a while do I declare unto thee that other generation, or rather not even this which cometh after, for it is unutterable and unspeakable. And before me the prophet Isaiah hath told thee this, where when proclaiming his passion, and his great care for the world, and admiring who he was, and what he became, and whither he descended, he cried out loud and clear, saying thus, Who shall declare his generation? It is not then of that we are now to speak, but of this beneath, this which took place on earth, which was amongst 10,000 witnesses. And concerning this again we will relate in such wise as it may be possible for us, having received the grace of the Spirit. For not even this may any one set forth altogether plainly, forasmuch as this too is most awing. Think not therefore it is of small things thou art hearing, when thou hearest of this birth, but rouse up thy mind, and straightway tremble, being told that God hath come upon earth. For so marvellous was this, and beyond expectation, that because of these things the very angels formed a choir, and in behalf of the world offered up their praise for them. And the prophets from the first were amazed at this, that he was seen upon earth, and conversed with men. Yea, for it is far beyond all thought to hear that God, the unspeakable, the unutterable, the incomprehensible, and he that is equal to the Father, hath passed through a virgin's womb, and hath vouchsafed to be born of a woman, and to have Abraham and David for forefathers. But why do I say Abraham and David? For what is even more amazing, there are those women, whom we have lately mentioned. Hearing these things, arise, and surmise nothing low. But even because of this very thing most of all shouldest thou marvel, that being Son of the unoriginate God, and his true Son, he suffered himself to be called also Son of David, that he might make thee Son of God. He suffered a slave to be father to him, that he might make the Lord father to thee, a slave. Seest thou at once from the beginning of what nature are the Gospels? If thou doubt concerning the things that pertain to thee, from what belongs to him believe these also. For it is far more difficult, judging by human reason, for God to become man, than for a man to be declared a son of God. When therefore thou art told that the Son of God is the Son of David and of Abraham, doubt not any more that thou too, the son of Adam, shall be Son of God. For not at random nor in vain did he abase himself so greatly, only he was minded to exalt us. Thus he was born after the flesh, that thou mightest be born after the Spirit. He was born of a woman, that thou mightest cease to be the son of a woman. Wherefore the birth was twofold, both made like unto us, and also surpassing ours. For to be born of a woman indeed was our lot, but to be born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of man, but of the Holy Ghost, was to proclaim beforehand the birth surpassing us, the birth to come, which he was about freely to give us of the Spirit, and everything else too was like this. Thus his baptism also was of the same kind, for it partook of the old, and it partook also of the new. To be baptized by the prophet marked the old, but the coming down of the Spirit shadowed out the new. And like as though any one were to place himself in the space between any two persons that were standing apart, and stretching forth both his hands were to lay hold on either side, and tie them together, even so hath he done, joining the old covenant with the new, God's nature with man's, the things that are his with ours. Seest thou the flashing brightness of the city, with how great a splendour it hath dazzled thee from the very beginning? How it hath straightway shown the King in thine own form, as though in a camp. For neither there doth the King always appear bearing his proper dignity, but laying aside the purple and the diadem, he often disguises himself in the garb of a common soldier. But there it is, lest by being known he should draw the enemy upon himself. But here, on the contrary, lest if he were known, he should cause the enemy to fly from the conflict with him, and lest he should confound all his own people. For his purpose was to save, not to dismay. For this reason he hath also straightway called him by his title, naming him Jesus. For this name, Jesus, is not Greek, but in the Hebrew language it is thus called Jesus, which is, when interpreted into the Greek tongue, a Saviour. And he is called a Saviour from his saving his people. Seest thou how he hath given wings to the hearer, at once speaking things familiar, and at the same time by these indicating to us things beyond all hope? I mean that both these names were well known to the Jews. For, because the things that were to happen were beyond expectation, the types even of the names went before, in order that from the very first all the unsettling power of novelty might be taken away. Thus he is called Jesus, who after Moses brought the people into the land of promise. Hast thou seen the type? Behold the truth. That led into the land of promise, this into heaven, and to the good things in the heavens. That after Moses was dead, this after the law had ceased, that as a leader, this as a king. However, lest having heard the word Jesus, thou shouldest by reason of the identity of the name be perplexed, he hath added, Jesus Christ, Son of David. But that other was not of David, but of another tribe. But wherefore doth he call it a book of the generation of Jesus Christ, while yet this book hath not the birth only, but the whole dispensation? Because this is the sum of the whole dispensation, and is made an origin and root of all our blessings. As then Moses calleth it the book of heaven and earth, although he hath not discoursed of heaven and earth only, but also of all things that are in the midst thereof. So also this man hath named his book from that which is the sum of all the great things done. For that which teems with astonishment, and is beyond hope and all expectation, is that God should become man. But this having come to pass, all afterwards follows in reasonable consequence. But wherefore did he not say, the son of Abraham, and then the son of David? It is not, as some suppose, that he means to proceed upward from the lower point, since then he would have done the same as Luke, but now he doth the contrary. Why then hath he made mention of David? The man was in the mouths of all, both from his distinction and from the time, for he had not been so very long since dead, like Abraham. And though God made promises to both, yet the one, as old, was passed over in silence, while the other, as fresh and recent, was repeated of all. Themselves, for instance, say, Doth not Christ come of the seed of David, and out of Bethlehem, the town where David was? And no man called him son of Abraham, but all son of David. And that because this last was more in the recollection of all, both on account of the time, as I have already said, and because of his royalty. On this principle again all the kings whom they had in honour after his time were named from him, both by the people themselves and by God. For both Ezekiel and other prophets besides speak of David as coming and rising again, not meaning him that was dead, but them who were emulating his virtue. And to Hezekiah he saith, I will defend this city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. And to Solomon too he said, that for David's sake he rent not the kingdom during his lifetime. For great was the glory of the man, both with God and with men. On account of this he makes the beginning at once from him who was more known, and then runs up to his father, accounting it superfluous, as far as regards the Jews, to carry the genealogy higher up. For these were principally the persons held in admiration, the one as a prophet and a king, the other as a patriarch and a prophet. But whence is it manifest that he is of David, one may say? For if he was not sprung of a man, but from a woman only, and the virgin hath not her genealogy traced, how shall we know that he was of David's race? Thus there are two things inquired, both why his mother's genealogy is not recited, and wherefore it can be that Joseph is mentioned by them, who hath no part in the birth, since the latter seems to be superfluous, and the former a defect. Of which then is it necessary to speak first? How the virgin is of David. How then shall we know that she is of David? Hearken unto God, telling Gabriel to go unto a virgin betrothed to a man, whose name was Joseph, of the house and lineage of David. What now wouldst thou have plainer than this, when thou hast heard that the virgin was of the house and lineage of David? Hence it is evident that Joseph also was of the same. Yes, for there was a law which bade that it should not be lawful to take a wife from any other stock, but from the same tribe. And the patriarch Jacob also foretold that he should arise out of the tribe of Judah, saying on this wise, There shall not fail a ruler out of Judah, nor a governor out of his loins, until he come for whom it is appointed, and he is the expectation of the Gentiles. Well, this prophecy doth indeed make it clear that he was of the tribe of Judah, but not also that he was of the family of David. Was there then in the tribe of Judah one family only, even that of David, or were there not also many others? And might it not happen for one to be of the tribe of Judah, but not also of the family of David? Nay, lest thou shouldest say this, the evangelist hath removed this suspicion of thine, by saying that he was of the house and lineage of David. And if thou wish to learn this from another reason besides, neither shall we be at a loss for another proof. For not only was it not allowed to take a wife out of another tribe, but not even from another lineage, that is, from another kindred, so that if either we connect with the virgin the words of the house and lineage of David, what hath been said stands good, or if with Joseph, by that fact this also is proved. For if Joseph was of the house and lineage of David, he would not have taken his wife from another than that whence he himself was sprung. What then, one may say, if he transgressed the law? Why, for this cause he hath by anticipation testified that Joseph was righteous, on purpose that thou mightest not say this. But having been told his virtue, mightest be sure also that he would not have transgressed the law. For he who is so benevolent and free from passion is not to wish, even when urged by suspicion, to attempt inflicting punishment on the virgin. How should he have transgressed the law for lust? He that showed wisdom and self-restraint beyond the law. For to put her away, and that privily, was to act with self-restraint beyond the law. How should he have done anything contrary to the law? And this when there was no cause to urge him. Now that the virgin was of the race of David is indeed from these things evident. But wherefore he gave not her genealogy, but Joseph's, requires explanation. For what cause was it then? It was not the law among the Jews that the genealogy of women should be traced. In order then that he might keep the custom, and not seem to be making alterations from the beginning, and yet might make the Virgin known to us, for this cause he hath passed over her ancestors in silence, and traced the genealogy of Joseph. For if he had done this with respect to the Virgin, he would have seemed to be introducing novelties. And if he had passed over Joseph in silence, we should not have known the Virgin's forefathers. In order therefore that we might learn, touching Mary, who she was, and of what origin, and that the laws might remain undisturbed, he hath traced the genealogy of her espoused husband, and shown him to be of the house of David. For when this hath been clearly proved, that other fact is demonstrated with it, namely, that the Virgin likewise is sprung from thence, by reason that this righteous man, even as I have already said, would not have endured to take a wife from another race. There is also another reason, which one might mention, of a more mystical nature, because of which the Virgin's forefathers were passed over in silence. But this it were not seasonable now to declare, because so much has been already said. Wherefore, let us stay at this point our discourse concerning the questions, and in the meanwhile let us retain with accuracy what hath been revealed to us, as, for instance, why he mentioned David first, wherefore he called the book a book of the generation, on what account he said, of Jesus Christ, how the birth is common and not common, whence it was that Mary was shown to be from David, and wherefore Joseph's genealogy is traced, while her ancestors are passed over in silence. For if ye retain these things, ye will the more encourage us with respect to what is to come. But if ye reject and cast them from your mind, we shall be the more backward as to the rest. Just as no husbandman would care to pay attention to a soil which had destroyed the former seed. Wherefore I entreat you to revolve these things. For from taking thought concerning such matters, there springs in the soul some great good, tending unto salvation. For by these meditations we shall be able to please God Himself, and our mouths will be pure from insults and filthy talking and reviling, while they are exercising themselves in spiritual sayings, and we shall be formidable to the devils, while arming our tongue with such words, and we shall draw unto ourselves God's grace the more, and it will render our eye more piercing. For indeed, both eyes and mouth and hearing He set in us to this intent, that all our members may serve Him, that we may speak His words, and do His deeds, that we may sing unto Him continual hymns, that we may offer up sacrifices of thanksgiving, and by these may thoroughly purify our consciences. For as a body will be the more in health when enjoying the benefits of a pure air, even so will a soul be more endued with practical wisdom when nourished in such exercises as these. Seest thou not even the eyes of the body, that when they abide in smoke they are always weeping, but when they are in clean air and in a meadow and in fountains and gardens, they become more quick-sighted and more healthy. Like this is the soul's eye also, for should it feed in the meadow of spiritual oracles, it will be clear and piercing, and quick of sight. But should it depart into the smoke of the things of this life, it will weep without end, and wail both now and hereafter. For indeed the things of this life are like smoke. On this account also one hath said, My days have failed like smoke. He indeed was referring to their shortness of duration and to their unsubstantial nature. But I would say that we should take what is said, not in this sense alone, but also as to their turbid character. For nothing doth so hurt and dim the eye of the soul as the crowd of worldly anxieties and the swarm of desires. For these are the wood that feedeth this smoke. And as fire, when it lays hold of any damp and saturated fuel, kindles much smoke, so likewise this desire, so vehement and burning, when it lays hold of a soul that is, so to speak, damp and dissolute, produces also in its way abundance of smoke. For this cause there is need of the dew of the Spirit, and of that air, that it may extinguish the fire, and scatter the smoke, and give wings to our thoughts. For it cannot be, that one weighed down with so great evils should soar up to heaven. It is well if being without impediment we can cleave our way thither, or rather it is not possible even so, unless we obtain the wing of the Spirit. Now if there be need both of an unencumbered mind and of spiritual grace, that we may mount up to that height, what if there be none of these things, but we draw to ourselves whatever is opposite to them, even a satanical weight? How shall we be able to soar upwards when dragged down by so great a load? For indeed, should any one attempt to weigh our words as it were in just balances, in 10,000 talents of worldly talk he will scarcely find 100 pence of spiritual words, or rather I should say, not even 10 farthings. Is it not then a disgrace and an extreme mockery, that if we have a servant, we make use of him for the most part in things necessary, but being possessed of a tongue, we do not deal with our members so well even as with a slave, but on the contrary make use of it for things unprofitable, and mere make-weights? And would it were only for make-weights! But now it is for what are contrary and hurtful, and to no respect advantageous to us. For if the things that we spoke were profitable to us, they would assuredly be also pleasing to God. But as it is, whatever the devil may suggest, we speak it all, now laughing, and now speaking wittily, now cursing and insulting, and now swearing, lying, and taking false oaths, now murmuring, and now making vain babblings, and talking trifles more than old wives, uttering all things that are of no concern to us. For tell me, who of you that stand here, if he were required, could repeat one psalm, or any other portion of the divine Scriptures? There is not one. And it is not this only that is the grievous thing, but that while ye are become so backward with respect to things spiritual, yet in regard of what belongs to Satan ye are more vehement than fire. Thus should anyone be minded to ask of you songs of devils and impure effeminate melodies, he will find many that know these perfectly, and repeat them with much pleasure. But what is the answer to these charges? I am not, you will say, one of the monks, but I have both a wife and children and the care of a household. Why, this is what hath ruined all, your supposing that the reading of the divine Scriptures appertains to those only, when ye need it much more than they. For they that dwell in the world, and each day receive wounds, these have most need of medicines. So that it is far worse than not reading, to account the thing even superfluous. For these are the words of diabolical invention. Hear ye not Paul saying, that all these things are written for our admonition? And thou, if thou hadst to take up a gospel, wouldest not choose to do so with hands unwashed. But the things that are laid up within it, dost thou not think to be highly necessary? It is because of this that all things are turned upside down. For if thou wouldest learn how great is the profit of the Scriptures, examine thyself, what thou becomest by hearing psalms, and what by listening to a song of Satan, and how thou art disposed when staying in a church, and how when sitting in a theatre. And thou wilt see that great is the difference between this soul and that, although both be one. Therefore Paul said, evil communications corrupt good manners. For this cause we have need continually of those songs, which serve as charms from the Spirit. Yes, for this it is whereby we excel the irrational creatures, since with respect to all other things we are even exceedingly inferior to them. This is a soul's food. This its ornament, its security, even as not to hear is famine and wasting. For I will give them, saith he, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst of water, but a famine of hearing the word of the Lord. What then can be more wretched, when the very evil which God threatens in the way of punishment, this thou art drawing upon thine head of thine own accord, bringing into thy soul a sort of grievous famine, and making it the feeblest thing in the world? For it is its nature both to be wasted and to be saved by words. Yea, this leads it on to anger, and the same kind of thing again makes it meek. A filthy expression is wont to kindle it to lust, and it is trained to temperance by speech full of gravity. But if a word merely have such great power, tell me, how is it thou dost despise the Scriptures? And if an admonition can do such great things, far more when the admonitions are with the Spirit. Yes, for a word from the divine Scriptures, made to sound in the ear, doth more than fire soften the hardened soul, and renders it fit for all good things. In this way too did Paul, when he had found the Corinthians puffed up and inflamed, compose them, and make them more considerate. For they were priding themselves on those very things, touching which they ought to have been ashamed, and to have hid their face. But after they had received the letter, hear the change in them, of which the teacher himself hath borne witness for them, saying on this wise, For this very thing, that ye sorrowed after a godly sort, what carefulness it wrought in you, yea, what clearing of yourselves, yea, what indignation, yea, what zeal, yea, what revenge. In this way do we bring to order servants and children, wives and friends, and make our enemies friends. In this way the great men too, they that were dear to God, became better. David, for instance, after his sin, when he had had the benefit of certain words, then it was that he came unto that most excellent repentance. And the apostles also by this mean became what they did become, and drew after them the whole world. And what is the profit, one may say, when any one hears, but doeth not what is said? No little will the profit be even from hearing, for he will go on to condemn himself, and to groan inwardly, and will come in time also to do the things that are spoken of. But he that doth not even know that he has sinned, when will he cease from his negligence? When will he condemn himself? Let us not therefore despise the hearing of the divine Scriptures, for this is of Satan's devising, not suffering us to see the treasure, lest we should gain the riches. Therefore he saith that the hearing the divine laws is nothing, lest he should see us from the hearing, acquiring the practice also. Knowing then this his evil art, let us fortify ourselves against him on all sides, that being fenced with this armour, we may both abide unconquered ourselves, and smite him on the head, and thus, having crowned ourselves with the glorious wreaths of victory, we may attain unto the good things to come, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 2. St. John Chrysostom, Archbishop of Constantinople, Homilies 25 through 43 on the Gospel according to St. Matthew, the miracles and teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. St. John Chrysostom, Homilies 25 through 43 on the Gospel of St. Matthew, translated by the Reverend Sir George Prevost, M.A. Homily 25, Matthew 7:28 through 8:4. And it came to pass, when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his doctrine. Yet was it rather natural for them to grieve at the unpleasantness of his sayings, and to shudder at the loftiness of his injunctions. But now so great was the power of the teacher, that many of them were even caught thereby, and thrown into very great admiration, and persuaded by reason of the sweetness of his sayings, not even when he ceased to speak, to depart from him at all afterwards. For neither did the hearers depart, he having come down from the mountain, but even then the whole auditory followed him, so great a love for his sayings had he instilled into them. But they were astonished most of all at his authority, for not with reference to another, like the prophet and Moses, did he say what he said, but everywhere indicating himself to be the person that had the power of deciding. For so, when setting forth his laws, he still kept adding, "But I say unto you," and in reminding them of that day, he declared himself to be the judge, both by the punishments and by the honours. And yet it was likely that this too would disturb them. For if, when they saw him by his works showing forth his authority, the scribes were for stoning and persecuting him, while there were words only to prove this, how was it other than likely for them to be offended? And especially when at first setting out these things were said, and before he had given proof of his own power. But, however, they felt nothing of this, for when the heart and mind is candid, it is easily persuaded by the words of the truth. And this is just why one sort, even when the miracles were proclaiming his power, were offended, while the other, on hearing mere words, were persuaded and followed him. This, I would add, the evangelist too is intimating, when he saith, "Great multitudes followed him," not any of the rulers, nor of the scribes, but as many as were free from vice, and had their judgment uncorrupted. And throughout the whole gospel thou seest that such clave unto him. For both while he spake, they used to listen in silence, not making any intrusion, nor breaking in upon the connection of his sayings, nor tempting him, and desiring to find a handle like the Pharisees. And after his exhortation they followed him again, marvelling. But do thou mark, I pray thee, the Lord's consideration, how he varies the mode of profiting his hearers, after miracles entering on words, and again from the instruction by his words passing to miracles. Thus, both before they went up into the mountain, he healed many, preparing the way for his sayings. And after finishing that long discourse to the people, he comes again to miracles, confirming what had been said by what was done. And so, because he was teaching as one having authority, lest his so teaching should be thought boasting and arrogant, he doth the very same in his works also, as having authority to heal, that they might no more be perplexed at seeing him teach in this way, when he was working his miracles also in the same. For when he was come down from the mountain, there came a leper, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. Great was the understanding and the faith of him who so drew near. For he did not interrupt the teaching, nor break through the auditory, but awaited the proper time, and approaches him when he is come down. And not at random, but with much earnestness, and at his knees, he beseeches him, as another evangelist saith, and with the genuine faith and right opinion about him. For neither did he say, If thou request it of God, nor, If thou pray, but, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. Nor did he say, Lord, cleanse me, but leaves all to him, and makes his recovery depend on him, and testifies that all authority is his. What then, saith one, if the leper's opinion was mistaken? It were meet to do away with it, and to reprove, and set it right. Did he then so do? By no means, but quite on the contrary, he establishes and confirms what had been said. For this cause, you see, neither did he say, Be thou cleansed, but, I will, be thou clean, that the doctrine might no longer be a thing of the other's surmising, but of his own approval. But the apostles not so. Rather, in what way? The whole people being in amazement, they said, Why give heed to us, as though by our own power or authority we had made him to walk? But the Lord, though he spake oftentimes many things modestly, and beneath his own glory, what saith he here, to establish the doctrine of them that were amazed at him for his authority? I will, be thou clean. Although in the many and great signs which he wrought, he nowhere appears to have uttered this word. Here, however, to confirm the surmise both of all the people and of the leper touching his authority, he purposely added, I will. And it was not that he said this, but did it not, but the work also followed immediately. Whereas, if he had not spoken well, but the saying had been a blasphemy, the work ought to have been interrupted. But now nature herself gave way at his command, and that speedily, as was meet, even more speedily than the evangelist hath said. For the word immediately falls far short of the quickness that there was in the work. But he did not merely say, I will, be thou clean, but he also put forth his hand and touched him, a thing especially worthy of inquiry. For wherefore, when cleansing him by will and word, did he add also the touch of his hand? It seems to me, for no other end, but that he might signify by this also, that he is not subject to the law, but is set over it, and that to the clean henceforth nothing is unclean. For this cause we see Elisha did not so much as see Naaman, But though he perceived that he was offended at his not coming out and touching him, observing the strictness of the law, he abides at home, and sends him to Jordan to wash. Whereas the Lord, to signify that he heals not as a servant, but as absolute master, doth also touch. For his hand became not unclean from the leprosy, but the leprous body was rendered clean by his holy hand. Because, as we know, he came not to heal bodies only, but also to lead the soul unto self-command. As therefore he from that time forward no more forbade to eat with unwashen hands, introducing that excellent law, which relates to the indifference of meats. Just so in this case also, to instruct us for the future, that the soul must be our care. That leaving the outward purifications, we must wipe that clean, and dread the leprosy thereof alone, which is sin. For to be a leper is no hindrance to virtue. He himself first touches the leper, and no man finds fault. For the tribunal was not corrupt, neither were the spectators under the power of envy. Therefore, so far from blaming, they were on the contrary astonished at the miracle, and yielded thereto. And both for what he said, and for what he did, they adored his uncontrollable power. Having therefore healed his body, he bids him, tell no man, but show himself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded, for a testimony unto them. Now some say that for this intent he bade him tell no man, that they might practice no craft about the discerning of his cure, a very foolish suspicion on their part. For he did not so cleanse as to leave the cleansing questionable, but he bids him tell no man, teaching us to avoid boasting and vainglory. And yet he well knew that the other would not obey, but would proclaim his benefactor. Nevertheless, he doth his own part. How then elsewhere doth he bid them tell of it, one may ask? Not as jostling with or opposing himself, but as teaching men to be grateful. For neither in that place did he give command to proclaim himself, but to give glory to God. By this leper training us to be clear of pride and vainglory, by the other to be thankful and grateful, and instructing on every occasion to offer to the Lord the praise of all things that befall us. That is, because men for the most part remember God in sickness, but grow slacker after recovery. He bids them continually both in sickness and in health to give heed to the Lord in these words, give glory to God. But wherefore did he command him also to show himself to the priest, and to offer a gift, to fulfill the law here again? For neither did he in every instance set it aside, nor in every instance keep it, but sometimes he did the one, sometimes the other, by the one making way for the high rule of life that was to come, by the other checking for a while the insolent speech of the Jews, and condescending to their infirmity. And why marvel, if just at the beginning he himself did this, when even the very apostles, after they were commanded to depart unto the Gentiles, after the doors were opened for their teaching throughout the world, and the law shut up, and the commandments made new, and all the ancient things had ceased, are found sometimes observing the law, sometimes neglecting it. But what, it may be said, doth this saying, show thyself to the priest, contribute to the keeping of the law? No little, because it was an ancient law, that the leper when cleansed should not entrust to himself the judgment of his cleansing, but should show himself to the priest, and present the demonstration thereof to his eyes, and by that sentence be numbered amongst the clean. For if the priest said not, the leper is cleansed, he remained still with the unclean without the camp. Wherefore he saith, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded. He said not, which I command, but for a time remits him to the law, by every means stopping their mouths. Thus, lest they should say, he had seized upon the priest's honour, though he performed the work himself. Yet the approving it he entrusted to them, and made them sit as judges of his own miracles. Why, I am so far, he saith, from striving either with Moses or with the priest, that I guide the objects of my favour to submit themselves unto them. But what is for a testimony unto them? For reproof, for demonstration, for accusation, if they be unthankful. For since they said, as a deceiver and impostor we persecute him, as an adversary of God, and a transgressor of the law. Thou shalt bear me witness, saith he, at that time that I am not a transgressor of the law. Nay, for having healed thee, I remit thee to the law, and to the approval of the priest, which was the act of one honouring the law, and admiring Moses, and not setting himself in opposition to the ancient doctrines. And if they were not in fact to be the better, hereby most of all one may perceive his respect for the law, that although he foreknew they would reap no benefit, he fulfilled all his part. For this very thing he did indeed foreknow, and foretold it, not saying, for their correction, neither for their instruction, but for a testimony unto them, that is, for accusation, and for reproof, and for a witness that all hath been done on my part. And though I foreknew they would continue incorrigible, not even so did I omit what ought to be done. Only they continued keeping up to the end their own wickedness. This we may observe he saith elsewhere also. This gospel shall be preached in all the world for a testimony to all the nations, and then shall the end come. To the nations, to them that obey not, to them that believe not. Thus, lest any one should say, and wherefore preach to all, if all are not to believe? It is that I may be found to have done all my own part, and that no man may hereafter be able to find fault, as though he had not heard. For the very preaching shall bear witness against them, and they will not be able hereafter to say, We heard not. For the word of godliness hath gone out unto the ends of the world. Therefore, bearing these things in mind, let us also fulfill all our duties to our neighbour, and to God let us give thanks continually. For it is too monstrous, enjoying as we do his bounty indeed every day, not so much as in word to acknowledge the favour. And this, though the acknowledgment again yield all its profit to us, since he needs not, be sure, anything of ours, but we stand in need of all things from him. Thus thanksgiving itself adds nothing to him, but causes us to be nearer to him. For if men's bounties, when we call them to memory, do the more warm us with their proper love charm, much more when we are continually bringing to mind the noble acts of our Lord towards us, shall we be more diligent in regard of his commandments. For this cause Paul also said, Be ye thankful. For the best preservative of any benefit is the remembrance of the benefit, and a continual thanksgiving. For this cause, even the awesome mysteries, so full of that great salvation, which are celebrated at every communion, are called a sacrifice of thanksgiving, because they are the commemoration of many benefits, and they signify the very sum of God's care for us, and by all means they work upon us to be thankful. For if his being born of a virgin was a great miracle, and the evangelist said in amaze, Now all this was done, his being also slain, what place shall we find for that? Tell me. I mean, if to be born is called all this, to be crucified, and to pour forth his blood, and to give himself to us for a spiritual feast and banquet. What can that be called? Let us therefore give him thanks continually, and let this precede both our words and our works. But let us be thankful not for our own blessings alone, but also for those of others. For in this way we shall be able both to destroy our envy and to rivet our charity, and make it more genuine. Since it will not even be possible for thee to go on envying them, in behalf of whom thou givest thanks to the Lord. Wherefore, as you know, the priest also enjoins to give thanks for the world, for the former things, for the things that are now, for what hath been done to us before, for what shall befall us hereafter, when that sacrifice is set forth. For this is the thing both to free us from earth, and to remove us into heaven, and to make us angels instead of men, because they too form a choir, and give thanks to God for his good things bestowed on us, saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. And what is this to us, that are not upon earth, nor are men? Nay, it is very much to us, for we have been taught so to love our fellow servants, as even to account their blessings ours. Wherefore Paul also, everywhere in his epistles, give thanks for God's gracious acts to the world. Let us too therefore continually give thanks for our own blessings and for those of others, alike for the small and for the great. For though the gift be small, it is made great by being God's gift. Or rather, there is nothing small that cometh from him, not only because it is bestowed by him, but also in its very nature. And to pass over all the rest, which exceed the sand in multitude, what is equal to the dispensation that hath taken place for our sake? In that what was more precious to him than all, even his only begotten Son, him he gave for us, his enemies, and not only gave, but after giving, did even set him before us as food, himself doing all things that were for our good, both in giving him and in making us thankful for all this. For because man is for the most part unthankful, he doth himself everywhere take in hand and bring about what is for our good. And what he did with respect to the Jews, by places and times and feasts, reminding them of his benefits, that he did in this case also, by the manner of the sacrifice, bringing us to a perpetual remembrance of his bounty in these things. No one hath so laboured that we should be approved, and great, and in all things right-minded, as the God who made us. Wherefore both against our will he befriends us often, and without our knowledge oftener than not. And if thou marvel at what I have said, I point to this as having occurred not to any ordinary person, but to the blessed Paul. For even that blessed man, when in much danger and affliction, often besought God that the temptations might depart from him. Nevertheless, God regarded not his request, but his profit, and to signify this he said, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So that before he hath told him the reason, he benefits him against his will, and without his knowing it. Now what great thing doth he ask, in requiring us to be thankful in return for such tender care? Let us then obey, and everywhere keep up this. Since neither were the Jews by anything ruined so much as by being unthankful. Those many stripes, one after another, were brought upon them by nothing else than this. Or rather, even before those stripes, this had ruined and corrupted their soul. For the hope of the unthankful, saith one, is like the winter's hoar frost. It benumbs and deadens the soul, as that doth our bodies. And this springs from pride, and from thinking oneself worthy of something. But the contrite will acknowledge grounds of thanksgiving to God, not for good things only, but also for what seems to be adverse, and how much soever he may suffer, will count none of his sufferings undeserved. Let us then also, the more we advance in virtue, so much the more make ourselves contrite. For indeed this, more than anything else, is virtue. Because as the sharper our sight is, the more thoroughly do we learn how distant we are from the sky. So the more we advance in virtue, so much the more are we instructed in the difference between God and us. And this is no small part of true wisdom, to be able to perceive our own desert. For he best knows himself who accounts himself to be nothing. Thus we see that both David and Abraham, when they were come up to the highest pitch of virtue, then best fulfilled this, and would call themselves, the one earth and ashes, the other a worm. And all the saints too, like these, acknowledged their own wretchedness. So that he surely who is lifted up in boasting is the very person to be most ignorant of himself. Wherefore also in our common practice we are wont to say of the proud, he knows not himself, he is ignorant of himself. And he that knows not himself, whom will he know? For as he that knows himself will know all things, so he who knows not this, neither will he know the rest. Such an one was he that saith, I will exalt my throne above the heavens, and did not account himself to be worthy so much as of the title of the apostles, after so many and so great deeds of goodness. Him therefore let us emulate and follow, and we shall follow him, if we rid ourselves of earth, and of things on earth. For nothing makes a man to be so ignorant of himself, as the being riveted to worldly concerns. Nor does anything again so much cause men to be riveted to worldly concerns, as ignorance of oneself, for these things depend upon each other. I mean, that as he that is fond of outward glory, and highly esteems the things present, if he strive for ever, is not permitted to understand himself. So he that overlooks these things will easily know himself, and having come to the knowledge of himself, he will proceed in order to all the other parts of virtue. In order therefore that we may learn this good knowledge, let us, disengaged from all the perishable things that kindle in us a great flame, and made aware of their vileness, show forth all lowliness of mind and self-restraint, that we may attain unto blessings both present and future, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, with whom be glory, might, and honour, to the Father, together with the Holy and good Spirit, now and ever, and world without end. Amen. End of Homily 25. Homily 26, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, by St. John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 26, Matthew 8, 5 through 13. And when he was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home, sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. The leper came unto him when he was come down from the mountain. But this centurion, when he was entered into Capernaum, wherefore then did neither the one nor the other go up into the mountain? Not out of remissness, for indeed the faith of them both was fervent, but in order not to interrupt his teaching. But having come unto him, he saith, My servant lieth at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. Now some say that by way of excuse he mentioned also the cause, why he had not brought him. For neither was it possible, saith he, paralyzed as he was, and tormented, and at his last gasp, to lift and convey him. For that he was at the point of expiring, Luke saith, he was even ready to die. But I say, this is a sign of his having great faith, even much greater than theirs who let one down through the roof. For because he knew for certain that even a mere command was enough for the raising up of the patient, he thought it superfluous to bring him. What then doth Jesus? What he had in no case done before, here he doeth. For whereas on every occasion he was used to follow the wish of his supplicants, here he rather springs toward it, and offers not only to heal him, but also to come to the house. And this he doth, that we might learn the virtue of the centurion. For if he had not made this offer, but had said, Go thy way, let thy servant be healed, we should have known none of these things. This at least he did in an opposite way, in the case also of the Phoenician woman. For here, when not summoned to the house, of his own accord he saith he will come, that thou mightest learn the centurion's faith and great humility. But in the case of the Phoenician woman, he both refuses the grant, and drives her, persevering therein, to great perplexity. For being a wise physician and full of resources, he knows how to bring about contraries the one by the other. And as here by his freely offered coming, so there by his peremptory putting off in denial, he unfolds the woman's faith. So likewise he doth in Abraham's case, saying, I will by no means hide from Abraham my servant, to make thee know that man's kindly affection and his care for Sodom. And in the instance of Lot, they that were sent refused to enter into his house, to make thee know the greatness of that righteous man's hospitality. What then saith the centurion? I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof. Let us hearken, as many as are to receive Christ, for it is possible to receive him even now. Let us hearken and emulate and receive him with as great zeal. For indeed, when thou receivest a poor man who was hungry and naked, thou hast received and cherished him. But say in a word only, and my servant shall be healed. See this man also, how, like the leper, he hath the right opinion touching him. For neither did this one say, Entreat, nor did he say, Pray and beseech, but command only. And then from fear lest out of modesty he refuse, he saith, For I also am a man under authority, having under me soldiers. And I say to this man, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh, and to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. What of that, saith one, if the centurion did suspect it to be so? For the question is, whether Christ affirmed and ratified as much. Thou speakest well and very sensibly. Let us then look to this very thing, and we shall find what happened in the case of the leper, the same happening here likewise. For even as the leper said, If thou wilt, and not from the leper only are we positive about his authority, but also from the voice of Christ, in that, so far from putting an end to the suspicion, he did even confirm it more, by adding what were else superfluous to say, in the phrase, I will, be thou cleansed, in order to establish that man's doctrine. So here too, it is right to see whether any such thing occurred. In fact, we shall find the same thing again taking place. For when the centurion had spoken such words, and had testified his so great prerogative, so far from blaming, he did even approve it, and did somewhat more than approve it. For neither hath the evangelist said that he praised the saying only, but declaring a certain earnestness in his praise, that he even marvelled, and neither did he simply marvel, but in the presence also of the whole people, and set him as an example to the rest, that they should emulate him. Seest thou how each of them that bore witness of his authority is marvelled at? And the multitudes were astonished at his doctrine, because he taught as one having authority. And so far from blaming them, he both took them with him when he came down, and by his words of cleansing to the leper confirmed their judgment. Again that leper said, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And so far from rebuking, he on the contrary cleansed him by such treatment as he had said. Again this centurion saith, Speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. And marvelling at him, he said, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Now to convince thee of this by the opposite also. Martha having said nothing of this sort, but on the contrary, Whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, he will give thee. So far from being praised, although an acquaintance and dear to him, and one of them that had shown great zeal toward him, she was rather rebuked and corrected by him, as not having spoken well. And that he said to her, Said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Blaming her, as though she did not even yet believe. And again, because she had said, Whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, he will give thee. To lead her away from such a surmise, and to teach her that he needs not to receive from another, but is himself the fountain of all good things, he saith, I am the resurrection and the life. That is to say, I wait not to receive active power, but work all of myself. Wherefore at the centurion he both marvels, and prefers him to all the people, and honours him with the gift of the kingdom, and provokes the rest to the same zeal. And to show thee that for this end he spake so, namely, for the instructing of the rest to believe in like manner, listen to the exactness of the evangelist, how he hath intimated it. For Jesus, saith he, turned him about, and said to them that followed him, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. It follows that to have high imaginations concerning him, this especially is of faith, and tends to procure the kingdom and his other blessings. For neither did his praise reach to words only, but he both restored the sick man whole in recompense of his faith, and weaves for him a glorious crown, and promises great gifts, saying on this wise, Many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down at the bosoms of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, but the children of the kingdom shall be cast out. Thus, since he had shown many miracles, he proceeds to talk with them more unreservedly. Then, that no one might suppose his words to come of flattery, but that all might be aware that such was the mind of the centurion, he saith, Go thy way, as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And straightway the work followed, bearing witness to his character. For the question is, whether each of them has set before us the zealousness of the man, and his having had the right opinion concerning Christ. But it is likely that after sending his friends, he himself also came and said these things. And if Luke did not speak of the one, no more did Matthew of the other. And this is not the part of men disagreeing amongst themselves, but rather of those that are filling up the things omitted by one another. But see by another thing also how Luke hath proclaimed his faith, saying that his servant was ready to die. Nevertheless, not even this cast him into despondency, neither did it cause him to give up, but even so he trusted that he should prevail. And if Matthew affirm Christ to have said, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel, and hereby to show clearly that he was not an Israelite, while Luke saith, He built our synagogue, neither is this a contradiction. For it was possible for one, even though not a Jew, both to build the synagogue and to love the nation. But do not thou, I pray thee, merely inquire what was said by him, but add thereto his rank also, and then thou wilt see the man's excellency. Because in truth great is the pride of them that are in places of command, and not even in afflictions do they take lower ground. He, for example, who is set down in John, is for dragging him unto his house, and saith, Come down, for my child is ready to die. But not so this man, rather he is far superior both to him and to those who let down the bed through the roof. For he seeks not for his bodily presence, neither did he bring the sick man near the physician, a thing which implied no mean imaginations concerning him, but rather a suspicion of his divine dignity. And he saith, Speak the word only. And at the beginning he saith not even, Speak the word, but only describe his affliction. For neither did he, of great humility, expect that Christ would straightway consent and inquire for his house. Therefore, when he heard him say, I will come and heal him, then, not before he saith, Speak the word. Nor yet did the suffering confound him, but still under calamity he reasons coolly, not looking so much to the health of the servant, as to the avoiding all appearance of doing anything irreverent. And yet it was not he that pressed it, but Christ that offered it. Nevertheless, even so, he feared, lest perchance he should be thought to be going beyond his own deservings, and to be drawing upon himself a thing above his strength. Seest thou his wisdom? Mark the folly of the Jews in saying, He was worthy for whom he should do the favour. For when they should have taken refuge in the love of Jesus towards men, they rather allege this man's worthiness, and know not so much as on what ground to allege it. But not so he, but he affirmed himself even in the utmost degree unworthy, not only of the benefit, but even of receiving the Lord in his house. Wherefore even when he said, My servant lieth sick, he did not add, Speak, for fear lest he should be unworthy to obtain the gift, but he merely made known his affliction. And when he saw Christ zealous in his turn, not even so did he spring forward, but still continues to keep to the end his own proper measure. And if any one should say, Wherefore did not Christ honour him in return? We would say this, that he did make return to him in honour, and that exceedingly. First, by bringing out his mind, which thing chiefly appeared by his not coming to his house, and in the second place, by introducing him into his kingdom, and preferring him to the whole Jewish nation. For because he made himself out unworthy even to receive Christ into his house, he became worthy both of a kingdom and of attaining unto those good things which Abraham enjoyed. But wherefore, one may say, was not the leper commended, who showed forth things greater than these? For he did not so much as say, Speak the word, but what was far more, be willing only, which is what the prophet saith concerning the Father. He hath done whatsoever he pleased. But he also was commended. For when he said, Offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them, he means nothing else but, Thou shalt be an accuser of them, in that thou didst believe. And besides, it was not the same for one that was a Jew to believe, and for one from without that nation. For that the centurion was not a Jew is evident, both from his being a centurion, and from its being said, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And it was a very great thing for a man who was out of the list of the Jewish people to admit so great a thought. For he did no less than imagine to himself, as it seems to me, the armies in heaven, or that the diseases and death and everything else were so subject to him, as his soldiers to himself. Wherefore he said likewise, For I also am a man set under authority, that is, Thou art God, and I man. I under authority, but thou not under authority. If I therefore, being a man and under authority, can do so much, far more he, both is God and is not under authority. Thus with the strongest expression he desires to convince him that he saith this as one giving not a similar example, but one far exceeding. For if I, said he, being equal in honour to them whom I command, and under authority, yet by reason of the trifling superiority of my rank am able to do such great things, and no man contradicts me, but what I command, that is done, though the injunctions be various. For I say to this man, Go, and he goeth, and to another, Come, and he cometh. Much more wilt thou thyself be able. And some actually read the place in this way. For if I, being a man, and having inserted a stop, they add, having soldiers under authority under me. But mark thou, I pray thee, how he signified that Christ is able both to overcome even death as a slave, and to command it as its master. For in saying, Come, and he cometh, and Go, and he goeth, he expresses this, If thou shouldest command his end not to come upon him, it will not come. Seest thou how believing he was? For that which was afterwards to be manifest to all, here is one who already hath made it evident, that he hath power both of death and of life, and leadeth down to the gates of hell, and bringeth up again. Nor is he speaking of soldiers only, but also of slaves, which related to a more entire obedience. But nevertheless, though having such great faith, he still accounted himself to be unworthy. Christ, however, signifying that he was worthy to have him enter into his house, did much greater things, marvelling at him, and proclaiming him, and giving more than he had asked. For he came indeed seeking for his servant health of body, but went away, having received a kingdom. Seest thou how the saying had been already fulfilled, Seek ye the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you. For because he evinced great faith and lowliness of mind, he both gave him heaven, and added unto him health. And not by this alone did he honour him, but also by signifying upon those casting out he is brought in. For now from this time forth he proceeds to make known to all, that salvation is by faith, not by works of the law. And this is why not to Jews only, but to Gentiles also, the gifts so given shall be proffered, and to the latter rather than to the former. For think not, saith he, by any means, that so it hath come to pass in regard of this man alone. Nay, so it shall be in regard of the whole world. And this he said, prophesying of the Gentiles, and suggesting to them good hopes. For in fact there were some following him from Galilee of the Gentiles. And this he said on the one hand, not letting the Gentiles despair, on the other, putting down the proud spirits of the Jews. But that his saying might not affront the hearers, nor afford them any handle, he neither brings forward prominently what he hath to say of the Gentiles, but upon occasion taken from the centurion. Nor doth he use nakedly the term Gentiles, not saying many of the Gentiles, but many from east and west, which was the language of one pointing out the Gentiles, but did not so much affront the hearers, because his meaning was under a shadow. Neither in this way only doth he soften the apparent novelty of his doctrine, but also by speaking of Abraham's bosom instead of the kingdom. For neither was that term familiar to them. Moreover, the introduction of Abraham would be a sharper sting to them. Wherefore John also spake nothing at first concerning hell, but what was most apt to grieve them, he saith, Think not to say, We are children of Abraham. He is providing for another point also, not to seem in any sense opposed to the ancient polity. For he that admires the patriarchs, and speaks of their bosom as an inheritance of blessings, doth much more than sufficiently remove also this suspicion. Let no man therefore suppose that the threat is one only, for both the punishment of the one and the joy of the other is double. Of the one, not only that they fell away, but that they fell away from their own. Of the other, not only that they attained, but that they attained what they had no expectation of. And there is a third together with these, that the one received what pertained to the other. And he calls them children of the kingdom, for whom the kingdom had been prepared, which also more than all was apt to gall them, and that having pointed to them as being in their bosom by his offer and promise, after all he puts them out. Then, because what he had said was mere affirmation, he confirms it by the miracle, as indeed he shows the miracles in their turn, by the subsequent accomplishment of the prediction. He accordingly, who disbelieves the health which the servant then received, let him from the prophecy, which hath this day come to pass, believe that other also. For so that prophecy again, even before the event, was made manifest to all by the sign which then took place. To this end you see, having first uttered that prediction, then and not before he raised up the sick of the palsy, that he might make the future credible by the present, and the less by the greater. Since for virtuous men to enjoy his good things, for the contrary sort to undergo his penalties, were nothing improbable, but a reasonable event, and according to the tenor of laws. But to brace up the feeble, and to raise the dead, was something beyond nature. But nevertheless, unto this great and marvellous work the centurion too contributed no little, which thing we see Christ also declared, saying, Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. Seest thou how the health of the servant proclaimed aloud both Christ's power and the faith of the centurion, and also became a pledge of the future? Or rather it was all a proclamation of Christ's power. For not only did he quite heal the servant's body, but the soul also of the centurion he did himself bring over unto the faith by his miracles. And do thou look not to this only, that the one believed, and the other was healed, but marvel how quickly also. For this too the evangelist declared, saying, And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. Even as of the leper also he said, He was straightway cleansed. For not by healing, but by doing so both in a wonderful manner and in a moment of time, did he display his power. Neither in this way only doth he profit us, but also by his constant practice in the manifestation of his miracles, of opening incidentally his discourses about his kingdom, and of drawing all men towards it. For those even whom he was threatening to cast out, he threatened not in order to cast them out, but in order that through such fear he might draw them into it by his words. For if not even hereby they were profited, theirs is the whole blame, as also of all who are in the like distemper. For not at all among Jews only may one see this taking place, but also among them that have believed. For Judas too was a child of the kingdom, and it was said to him with the disciples, Ye shall sit on 12 thrones. Yet he became a child of hell. Whereas the Ethiopian, barbarian as he was, and of them from the east and west, shall enjoy the crowns with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. This takes place among us also now. For many, saith he, that are first shall be last, and the last first. And this he saith, that neither the one may grow languid, as unable to return, nor the others be confident, as standing fast. This John also declared before from the beginning, when he said, God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. Thus, since it was so to come to pass, it is proclaimed long before, that no one may be confounded at the strangeness of the event. But he indeed speaks of it as a possible thing, for he was first. Christ, on the other hand, is what will surely be, affording the proof of it from his works. Let us not then be confident who stand, but let us say to ourselves, Let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. Neither let us who are fallen despair, but let us say to ourselves, He that falleth, doth he not arise? For many even who have mounted to the very summit of heaven, and have shown forth all austerity, and had made their abode in the deserts, nor saw any woman so much as in a dream, having become a little remiss, have been tripped up, and have come under the very gulf of wickedness. While others again from thence have gone up to heaven, and from the stage and orchestra have passed over unto the discipline of angels, and have displayed so great virtue as to drive away devils, and to work many other such miracles. And of these examples both the Scriptures are full, and our life is also full. Even whoremongers and effeminate persons stop the mouths of the Manichaeans, who say that wickedness is immovable, enrolling themselves on the devil's side, and weakening the hands of them that would wish to be earnest, and overturning all our life. For they who inculcate these things not only injure men as to the future, but here also turn all things upside down, for their own part at least. Because when will any regard virtue from among those that are living in wickedness, so long as he accounts his return that way, and his change for the better a thing impossible? For if now, when both laws exist, and penalties are threatened, and there is common opinion to recall the ordinary sword, and hell is looked for, and a kingdom promised, and wrong things reproached, and the good praised, hardly do any choose the labours that are to be undergone for virtue's sake. Shouldest thou take away all these things, what is there to hinder ruin and corruption universal? Knowing therefore the devil's craft, and that as well the lawgivers of the Gentiles as the oracles of God, and the reasonings of nature and the common opinion of all men, yea, barbarians and Scythians and Thracians and generally all, are directly opposed both to these and to such as strive to enact the doctrines of fate. Let us be sober, beloved, and bidding farewell to all those, let us travel along the narrow way, being both confident and in fear because of the precipices on either side, confident because of Jesus our guide. let us travel on, sober and wakeful. For though but for a little while one slumber, he is swept away quickly. For we are not more perfect than David, who by a little carelessness was hurled into the very gulf of sin. Yet he rose again quickly. Look not then to his having sinned only, but also to his having washed away his sin. For to this end he wrote that history, not that thou shouldest behold him fallen, but admire him risen, to teach thee, when thou art fallen, how thou shouldest arise. Thus, as physicians choose out of the most grievous diseases, and write them in their books, and teach their method of cure in similar cases, if so be men having practised on the greater may easily master the less, even so God likewise has brought forward the greatest of sins, that they also who offend in small things may find the cure of these easy, by means of the other, since if those admitted of healing, much more the less. Let us look then to the manner both of the sickness and of the speedy recovery of that blessed man. What then was the manner of his sickness? He committed adultery and murder. For I shrink not from proclaiming these things with a loud voice, since if the Holy Ghost thought it no shame to record all this history, much less ought we to draw any shade over it. Wherefore I not only proclaim it, but I add another circumstance also. For in fact, whosoever hide these things, they most of all men throw his virtue into the shade. And as they that say nothing of the battle with Goliath deprive him of no small crowns, so also they that hurry by this history. Doth not my saying seem a paradox? Nay, wait a little, and then ye shall know that with reason have we said this. For to this end do I magnify the sin, and make my statement stranger, that I may the more abundantly provide the medicines. What is it then which I add? The man's virtue, which makes the fault also greater. For all things are not judged alike in all men. For mighty men, it is said, shall be mightily tormented. And he that knew his Lord's will, and doeth it not, shall be beaten with many stripes. So that more knowledge is a ground of more punishment. For this same reason the priest, if he commits the same sin as those under government, shall not have the same to endure, but things far more grievous. Perhaps, seeing the charge against him amplified, ye tremble in fear, and marvel at me, as though I were going down a precipice. But I am so confident on that righteous man's behalf, that I will proceed even further. For the more I aggravate the charge, so much the more shall I be able to show forth the praise of David. And what more than this, you will say, can be uttered? Abundantly more. For as in the case of Cain, what was done was not a murder only, but worse than even many murders. For it was not a stranger, but a brother whom he slew, and a brother who had not done but suffered wrong, not after many murderers, but having first originated the horrid crime. So here too that which was perpetrated was not murder only. For it was no ordinary man that did it, but a prophet. And he slays not him that had done wrong, but him that had suffered wrong. For indeed he had been mortally wronged by the forcing away his wife. Nevertheless, after that he added this also. Perceive ye how I have not spared that righteous one, how without any the least reserve I have mentioned his offences? But yet so confident am I concerning his defence, that after so great load as this of his sin, I would there were present both the Manichaeans who most deride all this, and they that are diseased in the Martian way, that I might fully stop their mouths. For they indeed say he committed murder and adultery. But I say not this only, but have also proved the murder to be twofold, first from him who suffered the wrong, then from the quality of the person who offended. For it is not the same thing for one to whom the Spirit was vouchsafed, and on whom so great benefits had been conferred, and who had been admitted to such freedom of speech, and at such a time of life, to venture on crimes of that sort, as without all these to commit the selfsame thing. Nevertheless, even in this respect is that illustrious man most of all worthy of admiration, that when he had fallen into the very pit of wickedness, he did not sink nor despair, nor cast himself down in supineness on receiving of the devil so fatal a wound, but quickly, or rather straightway, and with great force, he gave a more fatal blow than he had received. And the same thing occurred as if in war and in battle some barbarian had struck his spear into the heart of a chieftain, or shot an arrow into his liver, and had added to the former wound a second more fatal than it. And he that had received these grievous blows when fallen, and wallowing in much blood all about him, were first to rise up quickly, then to hurl a spear at him that wounded him, and exhibit him dead on the ground in a moment. Even so in this case also. The greater thou declarest the wound, so much the more admirable dost thou imply the soul of him that was wounded to be, that he had power after this grievous wound both to rise up again and to stand in the very forefront of the battle array, and bear down him that had wounded him. And how great a thing this is, they best know, whosoever are fallen into grievous sins. For it is not so much a proof of a generous and vigorous soul to walk upright, and to run all the way, for such a soul hath the good hope going along with it, to cheer and to rouse it, to nerve and render it more zealous, as after those innumerable crowns, and so many trophies and victories, having undergone the utmost loss, to be able to resume the same course. And that what I say may be made plain, I will endeavour to bring before you another example, not at all inferior to the former. For imagine, I pray thee, some pilot, when he had compassed seas without number, and sailed over the whole ocean, after those many storms, and rocks, and waves, to sink, having with him a great freight, in the very mouth of the harbour, and hardly with his naked body to escape this grievous shipwreck. How would he naturally feel towards the sea, and navigation, and such labours? Will such a one then ever choose, unless he be of a very noble soul, to see a beach, or a vessel, or a harbour? I trow not. But he will lie hiding his face, seeing night all through the day, and shrinking from all things. And he will choose rather to live by begging than to put his hand to the same labours. But not such was this blessed man, but though he had undergone such a shipwreck, after those innumerable troubles and toils, he stayed not with his face covered, but launched his vessel, and having spread his sails, and taken the rudder in hand, he applies himself to the same labours, and hath made his wealth more abundant again. Now if to stand be so admirable, and not to lie down for ever after one has fallen, to rise up again, and to do such deeds, what crowns would not this deserve? And yet surely there were many things to drive him to despair. Is first, the greatness of his sins. Secondly, that not at the beginning of life, when our hopes also are more abundant, but near the end these things befell him. For neither doth the merchant, who hath just gone out of the harbour and been wrecked, grieve equally with him who after very many traffickings strikes on a rock. Thirdly, that when he had already obtained great wealth he incurred this. Yea, for by that time he had stored up no small merchandise. For instance, the deeds of his early youth, when he was a shepherd. Those about Goliath, when he set up the glorious trophy. those pertaining to his self-command respecting Saul. Since he showed forth even the evangelical long-suffering, and that he got his enemy 10,000 times into his hands, and continually spared him, and chose rather to be an outcast from his country, and from liberty, and from life itself, than to slay him that was unjustly plotting against him. Likewise, after his coming to the kingdom, there were noble deeds of his to no small amount. And besides what I have said, his credit also among the many, and his fall from glory so bright, would cause no ordinary perplexity. For the purple did by no means so much adorn him, as the stain of his sin disgraced him. And ye know, of course, what a great thing it is for evil deeds to be exposed, and how great a soul is required in such a one, not to despond after the censure of the multitude, and when he had so many witnesses of his own offences. Nevertheless, all these darts that noble person drew out of his soul, and so shone forth after this, so wiped out the stain, became so pure, that his offspring, even after his death, had their sins mitigated by him. And that which was said of Abraham, we find God saying the same of this man also, or rather much more of the latter. For with respect to the patriarch it is said, I remembered my covenant with Abraham. But here he saith not the covenant, but how? I will defend this city for my servant David's sake. And besides, on account of his favour towards him, he suffered not Solomon to fall from the kingdom, great as the sin was which he had committed. And so great was the glory of the man, that Peter, so many years after, in exhorting the Jews, spake on this wise, Let me freely speak unto you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried. And Christ too, discoursing with the Jews, signifies him after his sin to have had the Spirit vouchsafed to such a degree, that he was counted worthy to prophesy again, even concerning his Godhead. And thereby stopping their mouths, he said, How then doth David in spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand. And much as with Moses, so it fell out also with David. For as Miriam, even against Moses' will, was punished by God for insolence to her brother, because he greatly loved the holy man, even so this man, injuriously treated by his son, God did swiftly avenge, and that against his will. These things then are sufficient, yet rather before all others these are sufficient to indicate the man's excellency. For when God pronounces his judgment, we ought to inquire no further. But if ye would become particularly acquainted with his self-command, ye may by perusing his history after his sin, perceive his confidence towards God, his benevolence, his growth in virtue, his strictness unto his last breath. Having then these examples, let us be sober, and let us strive not to despond, and if at any time we fall, not to lie prostrate. For not to cast you into slothfulness did I speak of the sins of David, but to work in you more fear. For if that righteous man through a little remissness receive such wounds, what shall we have to suffer, who are every day negligent? Do not therefore look at his fall and be remiss, but consider what great things he did even after this, what great mournings, how much repentance he showed forth, adding his nights to his days, pouring forth fountains of tears, washing his couch with his tears, withal clothing himself in sackcloth. Now if he needed so great a conversion, when will it be possible for us to be saved, feeling insensible after so many sins? For he that hath many good deeds would easily even by this throw a shade over his sins. But he that is unarmed, wherever he may receive a dart, receives a mortal wound. In order, therefore, that this may not be so, let us arm ourselves with good works. And if any offence have befallen us, let us wash it away, that we may be counted worthy, after having lived the present life to the glory of God, to enjoy the life to come, unto which may we all attain, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 26. Homily 27, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew by St. John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 27, Matthew 8, 14 through 22. And when Jesus was come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto him. But Mark adds also, immediately, meaning to declare the time as well. But this evangelist hath set down only the miracle, without signifying besides the time. And whereas the others say that she that lay ill did also entreat him, this too he hath passed over in silence. But this comes not of any dissonance, but the one of brevity, the other of exact narrative. But for what intent did he go into Peter's house? As it seems to me, to take food. This at least is declared when it is said, she arose and ministered unto him. For he used to visit his disciples, as Matthew likewise, when he had called him, so honouring them and making them more zealous. But do thou mark, I pray thee, herein also Peter's reverence towards him. For though he had his wife's mother at home lying ill, and very sick of a fever, he drew him not into his house, but waited first for the teaching to be finished, then for all the others to be healed. And then, when he had come in, besought him. Thus from the beginning was he instructed to prefer the things of all others to his own. Therefore neither doth he himself bring him in, but he entered of his own accord, after the centurion had said, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, to show how much favour he bestowed on his disciple. And yet consider of what sort were the houses of these fishermen. But for all that, he disdained not to enter into their mean huts, teaching thee by all means to trample under foot human pride. And sometimes he heals by words only, sometimes he even stretches forth his hand, sometimes he doeth both these things, to bring into sight his way of healing. For it was not his will always to work miracles in the more surpassing manner, it being needful for him to be concealed a while, and especially as concerned his disciples, since they out of their great delight would have proclaimed everything. And this was evident from the fact that even after coming to the mount, it was needful to charge them that they should tell no man. Having therefore touched her body, he not only quenched the fever, but also gave her back perfect health. Thus, the disease being an ordinary one, he displayed his power by the manner of healing, a thing which no physician's art could have wrought. For ye know that even after the departing of fevers, the patients yet need much time to return to their former health. But then all took place at once. And not in this case only, but also in that of the sea. For neither there did he quiet the winds only and the storm, but he also stayed at once the swelling of the waves. And this also was a strange thing. For even if the tempest should cease, the waves continued to swell for a long time. But with Christ it was not so, but all at once was ended, and so it befell this woman also. Wherefore also the evangelist, to declare this, said, She arose and ministered unto him, which was a sign both of Christ's power and of the disposition of the woman, which she showed towards Christ. And another thing together with these we may hence observe, that Christ grants the healing of some to the faith even of others, since in this case too others besought him, as also in the instance of the centurion's servant. And this grant he makes, when there is no unbelief in him that is to be healed, but either through disease he cannot come unto him, or through ignorance imagines nothing great of him, or because of his immature age. When the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits from them with a word, and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet Esaias, that he took our infirmities, and bare our sicknesses. Seest thou the multitude by this time growing in faith? For not even when the time pressed could they endure to depart, nor did they account it unseasonable to bring their sick to him at eventide. But mark, I pray thee, how great a multitude of persons healed the evangelists pass quickly over, not mentioning one by one, and giving us an account of them, but in one word traversing an unspeakable sea of miracles. Then lest the greatness of the wonder should drive us again to unbelief, that even so great a people and their various diseases should be delivered and healed by him in one moment of time, he brings in the prophet also to bear witness to what is going on, indicating the abundance of the proof we have, in every case, out of the Scriptures, such that from the miracles themselves we have no more. And he saith, that Esaias also spake of these things, He took our infirmities, and bare our sicknesses. He said not, He did them away, but He took and bare them, which seems to me to be spoken rather of sins by the prophet in harmony with John, where he saith, Behold the Lamb of God, that beareth the sin of the world. How then doth the evangelist here apply it to diseases? Either as rehearsing the passage in the historical sense, or to show that most of our diseases arise from sins of the soul. For if the sum of all, death itself, hath its root and foundation from sin, much more the majority of our diseases also, since our very capability of suffering did itself originate there. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. Seest thou again his freedom from ostentation, in that, as the others say, he charged the devils not to say it was he, so this writer saith, he repels the multitudes from him. Now in so doing, he was at once both training us to be moderate, and at the same time allaying the envy of the Jews, and teaching us to do nothing for display. For he was not, we know, a healer to bodies only, but a curer also of the soul, and a teacher of self-restraint, by both disclosing himself, both by putting away their diseases, and by doing naught for display, because they indeed were cleaving unto him, loving him, and marvelling at him, and desiring to look upon him. For who would depart from one who was doing such miracles? Who would not long, were it only to see the face, and the mouth that was uttering such words? For not by any means in working wonders only was he wonderful, but even when merely showing himself, he was full of great grace. And to declare this the prophet said, Fair in beauty beyond the children of men. And if Esaias saith, He hath no form nor comeliness, he affirms it either in comparison with the glory of his Godhead, which surpasses all utterance and description, or is declaring what took place at his passion, and the dishonour which he underwent at the season of the cross, and the mean estate which throughout his life he exemplified in all respects. Further, he did not first give commandment to depart unto the other side, nor until he had healed them. For surely they could not have borne it. As therefore on the mountain they not only continued with him while exhorting them, but also when it was silence followed him, so here too, not in his miracles only did they wait on him, but also when he had ceased again, from his very countenance receiving no small benefit. For if Moses had his face made glorious, and Stephen like that of an angel, consider thou, our common Lord, what manner of person it was likely he would appear at such a time. Many now, perchance, have fallen into a passionate desire of seeing that form. But if we are willing, we shall behold one far better than that. For if we can pass through our present life with Christian boldness, we shall receive him in the clouds, meeting him in an immortal and incorruptible body. But observe how he doth not simply drive them away, lest he should hurt them. For he did not say, withdraw, but gave commandment to depart to the other side, giving them to expect that he would surely come thither. And the multitudes for their part evinced this great love, and were following with much affection. But some one person, a slave of wealth, and possessed with much arrogance, approaches him and saith, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. See thou how great his arrogance? For as not deigning to be numbered with the multitude, and indicating that he is above the common sort, so he comes near, because such is the Jewish character, full of unseasonable confidence. So too another afterwards, when all men were keeping silence, of his own accord springs up and saith, Which is the first commandment? Yet nevertheless the Lord rebuked not his unseasonable confidence, teaching us to bear even with such as these. Therefore he doth not openly convict them who are devising mischief, but replies to their secret thought, leaving it to themselves only to know that they are convicted, and doubly doing them good. First, by showing that he knows what is in their conscience. Next, by granting unto them concealment after this manifestation, and allowing them to recover themselves again, if they will. Which thing he doth in the case of this man also. For he, seeing the many signs, and many drawn after him, thought to make a gain out of such miracles, wherefore also he was forward to follow him. And whence is this manifest? From the answer which Christ makes, meeting not the question as it stands verbally, but the temper shown in its meaning. For what, saith he, dost thou look to gather wealth by following me? Seest thou not then that I have not even a lodging, not even so much as the birds have? For the foxes, saith he, have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. Now these were not the words of one turning himself away, but of one who, while putting to the proof his evil disposition, yet permitted him, if he were willing with such a prospect, to follow him, and to convince thee of his wickedness, when he hath heard these things, and had been proved, he did not say, I am ready to follow thee. And in many other places also Christ is clearly doing this. He doth not openly convict, but by his answer he manifests the purpose of them that are coming unto him. Thus to him again that said, Good Master, and had thought by such flattery to gain his favour, according to his purpose he made answer, saying, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. And when they said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren seek thee, forasmuch as these were under the influence of some human infirmity, not desiring to hear something profitable, but to make a display of their relationship to him, and therein to be vainglorious, hear what he saith, Who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And again to his brethren themselves, saying unto him, Show thyself to the world, and wishing thence to feed their vainglory. He said, Your time, so he speaks, is always ready, but my time is not yet come. And in the opposite cases too he doth so, as in that of Nathanael, saying, Behold an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile. And again, Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. For neither in this did he reply to the words, but to the intention of him that sent them. And with the people again in like manner, he addresses his discourse unto their conscience, saying, What went ye out into the wilderness to see? That is because they were probably feeling about John as though he had been a sort of easy and wavering person. To correct this their suspicion, he saith, What went ye out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind? Or a man clothed with soft raiment? By both these figures declaring that he was neither of himself a waverer, nor would be softened by any luxury. Thus then in the present case also he makes his answer to their meaning. And see how in this also he shows forth great moderation, and that he did not say, I have it indeed, but despise it, but I have it not. Seest thou what exact care goes along with his condescension? Even as when he eats and drinks, when he seems to be acting in an opposite way to John. This too he doeth for the sake of the Jews' salvation, or rather for that of the whole world, at once both stopping the mouths of the heretics, and desiring to win also more abundantly those of that day to himself. But a certain other one, we read, said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. Didst thou mark the difference? How one impudently saith, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. But this other, although asking a thing of sacred duty, saith, Suffer me. Yet he suffered him not, but saith, Let the dead bury their dead, but do thou follow me. For in every case he had regard to the intention. And wherefore did he not suffer him, one may ask? Because on the one hand, there were those that would fulfill that duty, and the dead was not going to remain unburied. On the other, it was not fit for this man to be taken away from the weightier matters. But by saying their own dead, he implies that this is not one of his dead, and that because he that was dead was, at least as I suppose, of the unbelievers. Now if thou admire the young man, that for a matter so necessary he besought Jesus, and did not go away of his own accord, much rather do thou admire him for staying also when forbidden. Was it not then, one may say, extreme ingratitude, not to be present at the burial of his father? If indeed he did so out of negligence, it was ingratitude. But if in order not to interrupt a more needful work, his departing would most surely have been of extreme inconsideration. For Jesus forbade him not as commanding to think lightly of the honour due to our parents, but signifying that nothing ought to be to us more urgent than the things of heaven, and that we ought with all diligence to cleave to these, and not to put them off for ever so little, though our engagements be exceeding indispensable and pressing. For what can be more needful than to bury a father? What more easy, since it would not even consume any long time? But if one ought not to spend even as much time as is required for a father's burial, nor is it safe to be parted even so long from our spiritual concerns, consider what we deserve, who all our time stand off from the things that pertain to Christ, and prefer things very ordinary to such as are needful, and are remiss, when there is nothing to press on us. And herein too we should admire the instructiveness of his teaching, that he nailed him fast to his word, and with this freed him from those endless evils, such as lamentations and mournings and the things that followed thereafter. For after the burial he must of necessity proceed to inquire about the will, then about the distribution of the inheritance, and all the other things that follow thereupon. And thus waves after waves coming in succession upon him would bear him away very far from the harbour of truth. For this cause he draws him, and fastens him to himself. But if thou still marvellest, and art perplexed, that he was not permitted to be present at his father's burial, consider that many suffer not the sick, if it be a father that is dead, or a mother, or a child, or any other of their kinsmen, to know it, nor to follow him to the tomb. And we do not for this charge them with cruelty or inhumanity, and very reasonably. For on the contrary, it were cruelty to bring out to the funeral solemnity men in such a state. But if to mourn and be afflicted in mind for them that are of our kindred is evil, much more our being withdrawn from spiritual discourses. For this same cause he said elsewhere also, no man having put his hand to the plough and looking back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. And surely it is far better to proclaim the kingdom, and draw back others from death, than to bury the dead body, that is nothing advantaged thereby, and especially when there are some to fulfill all these duties. Nothing else then do we learn hereby, but that we must not wantonly lose any, no, not the smallest time, though there be 10,000 things to press on us, but to set what is spiritual before all, even the most indispensable matters, and to know both what is life and what is death. Since many even of them that seem to live are nothing better than dead men, living as they do in wickedness, or rather these are worse than the dead. For he that is dead, it is said, is freed from sin, but this man is a slave to sin. For tell me not of this, that he is not eaten of worms, nor lies in a coffin, nor hath closed his eyes, nor is bound in grave clothes. Nay, for these things he undergoes more grievously than the dead, no worms devouring him, but the passions of his soul tearing him to pieces more fiercely than wild beasts. And if his eyes be open, this too again is far worse than having closed them. For those of the dead see no evil thing, but this man is gathering unto himself diseases without number, while his eyes are open. And whereas the other lies in a coffin, unmoved by anything, this one is buried in the tomb of his innumerable distempers. But thou seest not his body in a state of decay. And what of that? Since before his body his soul is corrupted and destroyed, and undergoes greater rottenness. For the other stinketh a few days, but this for the whole of his life exhales evil odours, having a mouth more foul than sewers. And so the one differs from the other by just so much as this, that the dead indeed undergoes that decay only which comes of nature, but this man together with that brings in also that rottenness which is from intemperance, devising each day unnumbered causes of corruption. But is he borne on horseback? And what of that? Why, so is the other on a couch. And what is very hard, while the one is seen by no one in his dissolution and decay, but hath his coffin for a veil, this man is going about everywhere with his evil savour, bearing about a dead soul in his body as in a tomb. And if one could but once see a man's soul who is living in luxury and vice, thou wouldest perceive that it is far better to lie bound in a grave than to be riveted by the chains of our sins, and to have a stone laid over thee, than that heavy cover of insensibility. Wherefore above all things it behooves the friends of these dead men, seeing that they are past feeling, to come near to Jesus in their behalf, as Mary then did in the case of Lazarus. Though he stinketh, though he be dead 4 days, do not despair, but approach, and remove the stone first. Yea, for then thou shalt see him lying as in a tomb, and bound in his grave clothes. And if ye will, let it be some one of them that are great and distinguished, whom we bring before you. Nay, fear not, for I will state the example without a name. Or rather, though I should mention the name, not even so neither be any fear. For whoever fears a dead man, seeing that whatever one may do, he continues dead, and the dead cannot injure the living either little or much. Let us then behold their head bound up. For indeed, when they are for ever drunken, even as the dead by their many wrappers and grave clothes, so are all their organs of sense closed and bound up. And if thou wilt look at their hands too, thou shalt see these again bound to their belly, like those of the dead, and fastened about not with grave clothes, but what is far more grievous, with the bands of covetousness, obtaining as they do no leave from her to be stretched out for almsgiving, nor for any other of such like good deeds. Rather she renders them more useless than those of the dead. Wouldst thou also see their feet bound together? See them again fastened about with cares, and for this cause never able to run into the house of God. Hast thou seen the dead? Behold also the embalmer. Who then is the embalmer of these? The devil, who carefully fastens them about, and suffers not the man any longer to appear a man, but a dry stalk. For where there is no eye, nor hands, nor feet, nor any other such things, how can such a one appear a man? Even so may we see their soul also swaddled up, and rather an image than a soul. Forasmuch then as they are in a sort of senseless state, being turned to dead men, let us in their behalf draw nigh unto Jesus. Let us entreat him to raise them up. Let us take away the stone. Let us loosen the grave clothes. For if thou take away the stone, that is, their insensibility to their own miseries, thou wilt quickly be able to bring them also out of the tomb. And having brought them out, thou wilt more easily rid them of their bonds. Then shall Christ know thee, when thou art risen, when unbound. Then will he call thee even unto his own supper. As many therefore of you as are friends of Christ, as many as are disciples, as many as love him that is gone, draw near unto Jesus and pray. For even though his ill savour abound and be ever so intense, nevertheless not even so should we, his friends, forsake him, but so much the rather draw near, even as the sisters of Lazarus then did. Neither should we leave interceding, beseeching, entreating, until we have received him alive. For if we thus order our own affairs and those of our neighbours, we shall also attain speedily unto the life to come, unto which may we all attain, by the grace and love to man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 27. Homily 28, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, by St. John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 28, Matthew 8, 23 through 34. And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. Now Luke, to free himself from having the order of time required of him, saith thus, And it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and Mark in like manner. But this evangelist not so, but he maintains the order in this place also. For they did not all of them write all things in this way. And these things I have mentioned before, lest any one from the omission should suppose there was a discordance. The multitudes then he sent on, but the disciples he took with himself, for the others mention this too. And he took them with him not for naught, nor at hazard, but in order to make them spectators of the miracle that was to take place. For like a most excellent trainer, he was anointing them with a view to both objects, as well as to be undismayed in dangers, as to be modest in honours. Thus, that they may not be high-minded, because having sent away the rest, he retained them. He suffers them to be tossed with the tempest, at once correcting this, and disciplining them to bear trials nobly. For great indeed were the former miracles too, but this contained also in it a kind of discipline, and that no inconsiderable one, and was a sign akin to that of old. For this cause he takes the disciples only with himself. For as, when there was a display of miracles, he suffers the people also to be present, so when trial and terrors were rising up against him, then he takes with him none but the champions of the whole world, whom he was to discipline. And while Matthew merely mentioned that he was asleep, Luke saith that it was on a pillow, signifying both his freedom from pride, and to teach us hereby a high degree of austerity. The tempest therefore being thoroughly excited, and the sea raging, they awake him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. But he rebuked them before he rebuked the sea, because, as I said, for discipline these things were permitted, and they were a type of the temptations that were to overtake them. Yea, for after these things again, he often suffered them to fall into more grievous tempests of fortune, and bear long with them. Wherefore Paul also said, I would not, brethren, have you ignorant, that we were pressed out of measure beyond strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. And after this again, who delivered us from so great deaths, signifying therefore hereby, that they ought to be confident that the waves rise high, and that he orders all things for good, he first of all reproves them. For indeed their very alarm was a profitable occurrence, that the miracle might appear greater, and their remembrance of the event be rendered lasting. Since when anything strange is about to happen, there are prepared beforehand many things to cause remembrance, lest after the miracle hath passed by, men should sink into forgetfulness. Thus Moses also first is in fear of the serpent, and not merely in fear, but even with much distress, and then he sees that strange thing come to pass. So these two, having first looked to perish, were then saved, that having confessed the danger, they might learn the greatness of the miracle. Therefore also he sleeps, for had he been awake when it happened, either they would not have feared, or they would not have besought him, or they would not so much as have thought of his being able to do any such thing. Therefore he sleeps, to give occasion for their timidity, and to make their perception of what was happening more distinct. For a man looks not with the same eyes on what happens in the persons of others as in his own. Therefore, since they had seen all benefited, while themselves had enjoyed no benefit, and were supine, for neither were they lame, nor had they any other such infirmity, and it was meet that they should enjoy his benefits by their own perception, he permits the storm, that by their deliverance they might attain to a clearer perception of the benefit. Therefore neither doth he this in the presence of the multitudes, that they might not be condemned for little faith, but he has them apart, and corrects them, and before the tempest of the waters he puts an end to the tempest of their soul, rebuking them and saying, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Instructing them also that men's fear is wrought not by the approach of the temptations, but by the weakness of their mind. But should anyone say that it was not fearfulness or little faith to come near and awaken him, I would say this, that that very thing was an especial sign of their wanting the right opinion concerning him. That is, his power to rebuke when awakened they knew, but that he could do so even sleeping they knew not as yet. And why at all marvel that it was so now, when even after many other miracles their impressions were still rather imperfect? Wherefore also they are often rebuked, as when he saith, Are ye also yet without understanding? Marvel not then, if when the disciples were in such imperfect dispositions, the multitudes had no exalted imagination of him. For they marvelled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the sea and the winds obey him? But Christ chode not with them for calling him a man, but waited to teach them by his signs that their supposition was mistaken. But from what did they think him a man? First from his appearance, then from his sleeping, and his making use of a ship. So on this account they were cast into perplexity, saying, What manner of man is this? Since while the sleep in the outward appearance showed man, the sea and the calm declared him God. For because Moses had once done some such thing, in this regard also doth he signify his own superiority, and that the one works miracles as a slave, the other as Lord. Thus he put forth no rod, as Moses did, neither did he stretch forth his hands to heaven, nor did he need any prayer, but as was meet for a master commanding his handmaid, or a creator his creature, so did he quiet and curb it by word and command only. And all the surge was straightway at an end, and not one trace of the disturbance remained. For this the evangelist declared, saying, And there was a great calm. And that which had been spoken of the Father as a great thing, this he showed forth again by his works. And what had been said concerning him? He spake, it saith, and the stormy wind ceased. So here likewise he spake, and there was a great calm. And for this most of all did the multitudes marvel at him, who would not have marvelled, had he done it in such manner as did Moses. Now when he is departed from the sea, there follows another miracle yet more awing. For men possessed with devils, like wicked runaways at sight of their master, said, What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? For, because the multitudes called him man, the devils came proclaiming his Godhead, and they that heard not the sea swelling and subsiding, heard from the devils the same cry, as it by its calm was loudly uttering. Then, lest the thing might seem to come of flattery, according to their actual experience, they cry out and say, Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? With this view, then, their enmity is avowed beforehand, that their entreaty may not incur suspicion. For indeed they were invisibly receiving stripes, and the sea was not in such a storm as they, galled and inflamed, and suffering things intolerable from his mere presence. Accordingly, no man daring to bring them to him, Christ of himself goes unto them. And Matthew indeed relates that they said, Art thou come hither before the time to torment us? But the other evangelists have added, that they also entreated and adjured him not to cast them into the deep, for they supposed that their punishment was now close upon them, and feared, as even now about to fall into vengeance. And though Luke and those who follow him say that it was one person, but this evangelist too, this doth not exhibit any discrepancy at all. I grant that if they had said there was only one, and no other, they would appear to disagree with Matthew. But if that spake of the one, this of two, the statement comes not of disagreement, but of a different manner of narration. That is, I for my part think, Luke singled out the fiercest one of them for his narrative, wherefore also in more tragical wise doth he report their miserable case. As, for instance, that bursting his bonds and chains he used to wander about the wilderness. And Mark saith that he also cut himself with the stones. And their words too are such as well betray their implacable and shameless nature. For saith he, Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? You see that they had sinned, they could not deny. But they demand not to suffer their punishment before the time. For since he had caught them in the act of perpetrating those horrors so incurable and lawless, and deforming and punishing his creature in every way, and they supposed that he, for the excess of their crimes, would not await the time of their punishment, therefore they besought and entreated him. And they that endured not even bands of iron come bound, and they that run about the mountains are gone forth into the plain, and those who hinder all others from passing, at sight of him blocking up the way, stand still. But what can be the reason that they love also to dwell in the tombs? They would fain suggest to the multitude a pernicious opinion, as though the souls of the dead become demons, which God forbid we should ever admit into our conception. But what then wilt thou say, one may ask, when many of the sorcerers take children and slay them, in order to have the soul afterwards to assist them? Why, whence is this evident? For of their slaying them, indeed, many tell us, but as to the souls of the slain being with them, whence knowest thou it, I pray thee? The possessed themselves, it is replied, cry out, I am the soul of such a one. But this too is a kind of stage play, the devilish deceit. For it is not the spirit of the dead that cries out, but the evil spirit that feigns these things in order to deceive the hearers. For if it were possible for a soul to enter into the substance of an evil spirit, much more into its own body. And besides, it stands not to reason that the injured soul should cooperate with the wrongdoer, or that a man should be able to change an incorporeal power into another substance. For if in bodies this were impossible, and one could not make a man's body become that of an ass, much more were this impossible in the invisible soul. Neither could one transform it into the substance of an evil spirit. So that these are the sayings of besotted old wives, and spectres to frighten children. Nor indeed is it possible for a soul torn away from the body to wander here any more. For the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God. And if of the righteous, then those children's souls also. For neither are they wicked, and the souls too of sinners are straightway laid away hence. And it is evident from Lazarus and the rich man, and elsewhere too Christ saith, This day they require thy soul of thee. And it may not be that a soul, when it is gone forth from the body, should wander here, nor is the reason hard to see. For if we, going about on the earth which is familiar and well known to us, being encompassed with a body, when we are journeying in a strange road, know not which way to go unless we have someone to lead us, how should the soul, being rent away from the body, and having gone out from all her accustomed region, know where to walk without one to show her the way? and from many other things too one might perceive that it is not possible for a disembodied soul to remain here. For both Stephen saith, Receive my spirit, and Paul, to depart and to be with Christ is far better. And of the patriarch too the Scripture saith, that he was gathered unto his fathers, being cherished in a good old age. And as to the proof that neither can the souls of sinners continue here, hear the rich man making much entreaty for this, and not obtaining it. Since had it been at all possible, he would have come and have told what had come to pass there. Whence it is evident that after their departure hence our souls are led away into some place, having no more power of themselves to come back again, but awaiting that dreadful day. Now, should any one say, And wherefore did Christ fulfill the devil's request, suffering them to depart into the herd of swine? This would be our reply, that he did so, not as yielding to them, but as providing for many objects thereby. 1. To teach them that are delivered from those wicked tyrants, how great the malice of their insidious enemies. Another, that all might learn how not even against swine are they bold, except he allow them. A third, that they would have treated those men more grievously than the swine, unless even in their calamity they had enjoyed much of God's providential care. For that they hate us more than the brutes is surely evident to every man. So then they that spared not the swine, but in one moment of time cast them all down the precipice, much more would they have done so to the men whom they possessed, leading them towards the desert, and carrying them away, unless even in their very tyranny the guardian care of God had abounded, to curb and check the excess of their violence. Whence it is manifest that there is no one who doth not enjoy the benefit of God's providence. And if not all alike, nor after one manner, this is itself a very great instance of providence, in that according to each man's profit, the work also of providence is displayed. And beside what hath been mentioned, there is another thing also, which we learn from this, that his providence is not only over all in common, but also over each in particular, which he also declared with respect to his disciples, saying, But the very hairs of your head are numbered. And from these demoniacs too one may clearly perceive this, who would have been choked long before, if they had not enjoyed the benefit of much tender care from above. For these reasons then he suffered them to depart into the herd of swine, and that they who also dwelt in those places should learn his power. For where his name was great, he did not greatly display himself. But where no one knew him, but they were still in an insensible condition, he made his miracles to shine out, so as to bring them over to the knowledge of his Godhead. For it is evident from the event that the inhabitants of that city were a sort of senseless people. For when they ought to have adored and marvelled at his power, they sent him away, and besought him that he would depart out of their coast. But for what intent did the devils destroy the swine? Everywhere they have laboured to drive men to dismay, and everywhere they rejoice in destruction. This, for instance, the devil did with respect to Job, although in that case too God suffered it, but neither in that case as complying with the devil, but willing to show his own servant the more glorious, cutting off from the evil spirit all pretext for his shamelessness, and turning on his own head what was done against the righteous man. Because now also the contrary of what they wished came to pass. For the power of Christ was gloriously proclaimed, and the wickedness of the demons, from which he delivered those possessed by them, was more plainly indicated, and how they want power to touch even swine, without permission from the God of all. And if any would take these things in a hidden sense, there is nothing to hinder. For the history indeed is this, but we are to know assuredly that the swinish sort of men are especially liable to the operations of the demons. And as long as they are men that suffer such things, they are often able yet to prevail. But if they are become altogether swine, they are not only possessed, but are also cast down the precipice. And besides, lest any should suppose what was done to be mere acting, instead of distinctly believing that the devils were gone out, by the death of the swine this is rendered manifest. And mark also his meekness together with his power. For when the inhabitants of that country, after having received such benefits, were driving him away, he resisted not, but retired, and left those who had shown themselves unworthy of his teaching, having given them for teachers them that had been freed from the demons, and the swineherds, that they might of them learn all that had happened, whilst himself retiring leaves the fear vigorous in them. For the greatness withal of the loss was spreading the fame of what had been done, and the event penetrated their mind. And from many quarters were wafted sounds, proclaiming the strangeness of the miracle, from the cured and from the drowned, from the owners of the swine, from the men that were feeding them. These things anyone may see happening now also, even many in the tombs possessed of evil spirits, whom nothing restrains from their madness, not iron, nor chain, nor multitude of men, nor advice, nor admonition, nor terror, nor threat, nor any other such thing. For so, when any man is dissolute, eager after all embraces, he differs not at all from the demoniac, but goes about naked like him, clad indeed in garments, but deprived of the true covering, and stripped of his proper glory, cutting himself not with stones, but with sins more hurtful than many stones. Who then shall be able to bind such a one? Who, to stay his unseemliness and frenzy, his way of never coming to himself, but for ever haunting the tombs? For such are the resorts of the harlots, full of much evil savour, of much rottenness. And what of the covetous man? Is he not like this? For who will be able ever to bind him? Are there not fears and daily threats, and admonitions and counsels? Nay, all these bonds he bursts asunder. And if any one come to set him free, he adjures him that he may not be freed, accounting it the greatest torture not to be in torture. Then which what can be more wretched? For as to that evil spirit, even though he despised men, yet he yielded to the command of Christ, and quickly sprang out of the man's body. But this man yields not even to his commandment. See at least how he daily hears him saying, Ye cannot serve God and mammon, and threatening hell, and the incurable torments, and obeys not. Not that he is stronger than Christ, but because against our will Christ corrects us not. Therefore such men live as in desert places, though they be in the midst of cities. For who that hath reason would choose to be with such men? I for my part would sooner consent to dwell with 10,000 demoniacs than with one diseased in this way. And that I am not mistaken in saying this is manifest from their respective feelings. For these last account him an enemy that hath done them no wrong, and desire even to take him for a slave when he is free, and encompass him with 10,000 evils. But the demoniacs do no such thing, but toss their disease to and fro within themselves. And while these overturn many houses, and cause the name of God to be blasphemed, and are a pest to the city and to the whole earth, they that are troubled by evil spirits deserve rather our pity and our tears. And the one for the more part act in insensibility, but the others are frantic while they reason, keeping their orgies in the midst of cities, and maddened with some new kind of madness. For what do all the demoniacs so bad, as what Judas dared to do, when he showed forth that extremity of wickedness? And all too that imitate him, like fierce wild beasts escaped from their cage, trouble their cities, no man restraining them. For these also have bonds upon them on every side, such as the fears of the judges, the threatening of the laws, the condemnation of the multitude, and other things more than these. Yet bursting asunder even these, they turn all things upside down. And should any one remove these altogether from them, then would he know assuredly the demon that is in them to be far fiercer and more frantic than he who is just now gone forth. But since this may not be, let us for the time suppose it for argument's sake, and let us take off from him all his chains, and then shall we clearly know his manifest madness. But be not afraid of the monster when we uncover it, for it is the representation in word, not the thing in truth. Let there be then some man, darting fire from his eyes, black, having from either shoulder serpents hanging down instead of hands. And let him have also a mouth, with sharp swords set in it instead of teeth, and for a tongue a gushing fountain of poison, and some baneful drug, and a belly more consuming than any furnace, devouring all that is cast unto it, and a sort of winged feet more vehement than any flame. And let his face be made up of a dog and of a wolf, and let him utter nothing human, but something discordant, and unpleasing, and terrible. And let him have also in his hands a firebrand. Perhaps what we have said seems to you to be terrible, but we have not even yet fashioned him worthily. For together with these things we must add others besides. I mean, that he is also to slay them that meet with him, to devour them, to fasten upon their flesh. Yet is the covetous man much more fierce even than this, assailing all like hell, swallowing all up, going about a common enemy to the race of men. Why, he would have no man exist, that he may possess all things. And he stops not even at this, but when in his longing he shall have destroyed all men, he longs also to mar the substance of the earth, and to see it all become gold. Nay, not the earth only, but hills also, and woods, and fountains, and in a word all things that appear. And to convince you that not even yet have we set forth his madness, let there be no man to accuse and frighten him, but take away the terror of the laws and supposition awhile, and thou wilt see him snatching up a sword, laying violent hands on all, and sparing none, neither friend, nor kinsman, nor brother, nor even his very parent. Nay, rather, in this case there is not even need of supposing, but let us ask him if he is not for ever framing to himself such imaginations, and if he does not in thought range among all men to destroy them, both friends and kinsmen, and even his very parents. Nay, rather, there is no need even to ask, because in truth all men know that they who are under the power of this disease are wearied even of their fathers' old age, and that which is sweet and universally desirable, the having children, they esteem grievous and unwelcome. Many, at least with this view, have even paid money to be childless, and have maimed their nature, not only by slaying their children after birth, but by not suffering them even to be born at all. Marvel not, therefore, if we have thus sketched the covetous man, for in truth he is far worse than what we have said. But let us consider how we shall deliver him from the demon. How then shall we deliver him? If he may be clearly made aware that his love of money stands very much in his way in respect of this very object, the gaining of money. For they that wish to gain in little things undergo great losses. whence accordingly a proverb hath been set forth to the same effect. Many, for instance, on many occasions, wishing to lend at large usury, and through the expectation of gain not having inquired about them who receive their money, have together with the interest lost also all their capital. Others again, falling into dangers, and not willing to give up a little, have together with the substance lost their life too. Again, when it has been in men's power to purchase either gainful offices, or some other such thing, by some trifling meanness, they have lost all. For because they know not how to sow, but have ever practised reaping, they of course continually fail of their harvest. For no man can be always reaping, as neither can be always gaining. Therefore, since they are not willing to spend, neither do they know how to gain. And should they have to take a wife, the same thing again befalls them. For either they are deceived into taking a poor wife for a rich one, or when they have brought home one that is rich, but full of faults without number, here too they have incurred more loss than gain. For it is not superfluity, but virtue, that causes wealth. For what profit is there of her wealth, when she is expensive and dissolute, and scatters all abroad more vehemently than any wind? What if she be unchaste, and bring in numberless lovers? What if she be drunken? Will she not quickly make her husband the poorest of men? But they do not only marry, but also buy at great risk, from their great covetousness, laboring to find not good slaves, but cheap ones. Consider then all these things, for the words concerning hell and the kingdom ye are not yet able to hear. And bearing in mind the losses which ye have often undergone from your love of money, in loans, and in purchases, and in marriages, and in offices of power, and in all the rest, withdraw yourselves from doting on money. For so shall ye be able to live the present life in security, and after a little advance to hear also the words that treat on self-government, and see through and look upon the very Son of righteousness, and to attain unto the good things promised by him, unto which God grant we may all attain, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 28. Homily 29, Commentary on the Gospel of St. Matthew, by St. John Chrysostom, translated by Sir George Prevost. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Homily 29, Matthew 9, 1-8. And he entered into a ship, and passed over, and came into his own city. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. By his own city here he means Capernaum. For that which gave him birth was Bethlehem, that which brought him up, Nazareth, that which had him continually inhabiting it, Capernaum. This paralytic, however, was different from that one who is set forth in John. For he lay at the pool, but this at Capernaum. And that man had his infirmity 38 years. But concerning this, no such thing is mentioned. And the other was in a state destitute of protectors. But this had some to take care of him, who also took him up and carried him. And to this he saith, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But to that he saith, Wilt thou be made whole? And the other he healed on a Sabbath day, but this not on a Sabbath, for else the Jews would have laid this also to his charge. And in the case of this man they were silent, but in that of the other they were instant in persecuting him. And this I have said, not without purpose, lest any one should think there is a discrepancy from suspecting it to be one and the same paralytic. But do thou, I pray thee, mark the humility and meekness of our Lord. For he had also before this put away the multitudes from him, and moreover, when sent away by them at Gadara, he withstood not, but retired, not however to any great distance. And again he entered into the ship and passed over, when he might have gone over afoot. For it was his will not to be always doing miracles, that he might not injure the doctrine of his humanity. Now Matthew indeed saith that they brought him, but the others that they also broke up the roof and let him down. And they put the sick man before Christ, saying nothing, but committing the whole to him. For though in the beginning he himself went about, and did not require so much faith of them that came unto him, yet in this case they both approached him, and had faith required on their part. For seeing, it is said, their faith, that is, the faith of them that had let the man down. For he doth not on all occasions require faith on the part of the sick only, as for instance, when they are insane, or in any other way, through their disease, are out of their own control. Or rather, in this case, the sick man too had part in the faith, for he would not have suffered himself to be let down, unless he had believed. Forasmuch then as they had evinced so great faith, he also evinces his own power, with all authority absolving his sins, and signifying in all ways that he is equal in honour with him that begat him. And mark, he implied it from the beginning by his teaching, when he taught them as one having authority. By the leper, when he said, I will, be thou clean. By the centurion, when upon his saying, Speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed, he marvelled at him, and celebrated him above all men. By the sea, when he curbed it with a mere word. By the devils, when they acknowledged him as their judge, and he cast them out with great authority. Here again, in another and a greater way, he constrains his very enemies to confess his equality in honour, and by their own mouth he makes it manifest. For he, to signify his indifference to honour, for there stood a great company of spectators shutting up the entrance, wherefore also they let him down from above, did not straightway hasten to heal the visible body, but he takes his occasion from them. And he healed first that which is invisible, the soul, by forgiving his sins, which indeed saved the other, but brought no great glory to himself. They themselves rather, troubled by their malice, and wishing to assail him, caused even against their will what was done to be conspicuous. He, in fact, in his abundance of counsel, made use of their envy for the manifestation of the miracle. Upon their murmuring then, and saying, This man blasphemeth, who can forgive sins but God only? Let us see what he saith. Did he indeed take away the suspicion? And yet if he were not equal, he should have said, Why fix upon me a notion which is not convenient? I am far from this power. But now hath he said none of these things, but quite the contrary he hath both affirmed and ratified, as well by his own voice, as by the performance of the miracle. Thus, it appearing that his saying certain things of himself gave disgust to his hearers, he affirms what he had to say concerning himself by the others, and what is truly marvellous, not by his friends only, but also by his enemies. For this is the excellency of his wisdom. By his friends, on the one hand, when he said, I will, be thou clean, and when he said, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. But by his enemies now, for because they had said, No man can forgive sins but God only, he subjoined, But that you may know that the Son of Man hath power to forgive sins upon the earth, then saith he to the sick of the palsy, Arise, and take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. And not here only, but also in another case, when they were saying, For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God. Neither in that instance did he put down this opinion, but again confirmed it, saying, If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though ye believe not me, believe the works. In this case indeed he discloses also another sign, and that no small one, of his own Godhead, and of his equality and honour with the Father. For whereas they said, To unbind sins pertains to God only, he not only unbinds sins, but also before this he makes another kind of display in a thing which pertained to God only, the publishing the secrets in the heart, for neither had they uttered what they were thinking. For behold, certain of the scribes, it saith, said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? But that it belongs to God only to know men's secrets, hear what saith the prophet, Thou most entirely alone knowest the hearts. And again, God trieth the hearts and reins. And Jeremiah too saith, The heart is deep above all things, and it is man, and who shall know him? And man shall look on the face, but God on the heart. And by many things one may see, that to know what is in the mind belongs to God alone. Implying therefore that he is God, equal to him that begat him. What things they were reasoning in themselves, for through fear of the multitude they durst not utter their mind. This their opinion he unveils and makes manifest, evincing herein also his great gentleness. For wherefore saith he, Think ye evil in your hearts? And yet if there were cause for displeasure, it was the sick man who should have been displeased, as being altogether deceived, and should have said, One thing I came to have healed, and amendest thou another? Why, whence it is manifest that my sins are forgiven? But now he for his part utters no such word, but gives himself up to the power of the healer. But these, being curious and envious, plot against the good deeds of others. Wherefore he rebukes them indeed, but with all gentleness. Why, if ye disbelieve, saith he, what went before, and account my saying a boast, behold, I add to it also another, the uncovering of your secrets. And after that again another. What then is this? The giving tone to the body of the paralyzed. And whereas, when he spake unto the sick of the palsy, he spake without clearly manifesting his own authority. For he said not, I forgive thee thy sins, but thy sins be forgiven thee. Upon their constraining, he discloses his authority more clearly, saying, But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. Seest thou how far he was from unwillingness to be thought equal to the Father? For he said not at all, The Son of Man hath need of another, or he hath given him authority, but he hath authority. Neither doth he say it for love of honour, but to convince you, so he speaks, that I do not blaspheme in making myself equal with God. Thus everywhere his will is to offer proofs clear and indisputable, as when he saith, Go thy way, show thyself to the priests, and when he points to Peter's wife's mother ministering, and permits the swine to cast themselves down headlong. And in the same manner here also. First, for a certain token of the forgiveness of his sins, he provides the giving tone to his body, and of that again, his carrying his bed, to hinder the fact from being thought a mere fancy. And he doeth not this before he had asked them a question. For whether is easier, saith he, to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Take up thy bed, and go into thine house? Now what he saith is like this: Which seems to you easier, to bind up a disorganized body, or to undo the sins of a soul? It is quite manifest to bind up a body. For by how much a soul is better than a body, by so much is the doing away sins a greater work than this. But because the one is unseen, the other in sight, I throw in that which, although an inferior thing, is yet more open to sense, that the greater also and the unseen may thereby receive its proof. Thus by his works anticipating even now the revelation of what had been said by John, that he taketh away the sins of the world. Well then, having raised him up, he sends him to his house, here again signifying his unboastfulness, and that the event was not a mere imagination. For he makes the same persons witnesses of his infirmity, and also of his health. For I indeed had desired, saith he, through thy calamity to heal those also, that seem to be in health, but are diseased in mind. But since they will not, depart thou home, to heal them that are there. Seest thou how he indicates him to be creator both of souls and bodies? He heals therefore the palsy in each of the two substances, and makes the invisible evident by that which is in sight. But nevertheless they still creep upon the earth. For when the multitude saw it, they marveled and glorified God, which, it is said, had given such power unto men. For the flesh was an offence unto them. But he did not rebuke them, but proceeds by his works to arouse them and exalt their thoughts. Since for the time it was no small thing for him to be thought greater than all men, as having come from God. For had they well established these things in their own minds, going on orderly, they would have known that he was even the Son of God. But they did not retain these things clearly, wherefore neither were they able to approach him. For they said again, This man is not of God. How is this man of God? And they were continually harping on these things, putting them forward as cloaks for their own passions. Which thing many now also do, and thinking to avenge God, fulfill their own passions, when they ought to go about with all moderation. For even the God of all, having power to launch his thunderbolt against them that blaspheme him, makes the sun to rise, and sends forth the showers, and affords them all other things in abundance, whom we ought to imitate, and so to entreat, advise, admonish, with meekness, not angry, not making ourselves wild beasts. For no harm at all ensues unto God by their blasphemy, that thou shouldest be angered, but he who blasphemed hath himself also received the wound. Wherefore groan, bewail, for the calamity indeed deserves tears, and the wounded man again, nothing can so heal him as gentleness. Gentleness, I say, which is mightier than any force. See, for example, how he himself, the insulted one, discourses with us, both in the Old Testament and in the New. In the one saying, O my people, what have I done unto thee? In the other, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And Paul too bids, in meekness instruct those that oppose themselves. And Christ again, when his disciples had come to him, requiring fire to come down from heaven, strongly rebuked them, saying, Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of. And here again he said not, O accursed, and sorcerers as ye are, O ye envious, and enemies of men's salvation, but, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? We must, you see, he used gentleness to eradicate the disease, since he was become better through the fear of man, will quickly return to wickedness again. For this cause he commanded also the tares to be left, giving an appointed day of repentance. Yea, and many of them in fact repented, and became good, who before were bad. As for instance Paul, the publican, the thief, for these being really tares turned into kindly wheat. Because, although in the seeds this cannot be, yet in the human will it is both manageable and easy. For our will is bound by no limits of nature, but hath freedom of choice for its privilege. Accordingly, when thou seest an enemy of the truth, wait on him, take care of him, lead him back to virtue, by showing forth an excellent life, by applying speech that cannot be condemned, by bestowing attention and tender care, by trying every means of amendment, in imitation of the best physicians. For neither do they cure in one manner only, but when they see the wound not yield to the first remedy, they add another, and after that again another. And now they use the knife, and now bind up. And do thou accordingly, having become a physician of souls, put in practice every mode of cure according to Christ's laws, that thou mayest receive the reward both of saving thyself and of profiting others, doing all to the glory of God, and so being glorified also thyself. For they that glorify me, saith he, I will glorify, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Let us, I say, do all things unto his glory, that we may attain unto that blessed portion unto which God grant we may all attain, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might for ever and ever. Amen. End of Homily 29.